The forest had been asleep for a long time, longer than most creatures could remember. It was the kind of sleep that wrapped itself around trees and stones, muffling sounds and softening colors until everything seemed to breathe in one slow, steady rhythm. And at the center of it all, beneath a sunbeam that had found its way through layers of ancient leaves, a massive, round figure lay still, a creature so peaceful that even the wind hesitated to disturb him. His name was Snorlax. For as long as anyone in that forest could recall, Snorlax had been there. Seasons had come and gone around him. Snow had fallen on his soft belly in winter. Flowers had bloomed beside his enormous paws in spring. And the cicadas had sung through long, drowsy summers while he continued his unbroken slumber. The forest had grown used to him, adjusting its rhythm to match his. Birds perched on his belly to rest. Vines crept gently over his sides, and sometimes a curious ratata or a daring pidgey would tiptoe near his face just to be sure he was real. And he was, very real, and very asleep. But one morning, as the mist curled low along the roots and the light of dawn stretched itself across the sleepy woodland, something shifted. It wasn't a loud noise or a sudden jolt, just a quiet moment of stillness, like the forest holding its breath. Then, with a deep, rumbling sigh that seemed to echo through the trees, Snorlax's eyes opened. The world was blurry at first. The colors of the forest were soft and hazy, the way dreams sometimes linger after waking. He blinked slowly, his mind still heavy with the weight of countless dreams. Dreams of endless fields of berries, soft clouds that tasted like marshmallows, and rivers made of honey. His belly grumbled faintly, though not with hunger exactly. It was more of a familiar reminder of life itself. He stretched, and the forest responded. Birds scattered from nearby branches, leaves fluttered in panic, and a few smaller Pokémon fled into the underbrush as Snorlax's mighty arms reached high above his head. The ground trembled as he yawned, a deep, cavernous sound that could have passed for distant thunder. He murmured, not quite words, but a feeling. When the sound faded, silence followed. For a long moment, Snorlax simply sat there, blinking in the soft light, unsure of what to do next. Usually, this was the part where he would roll to his side, close his eyes again, and drift effortlessly back into dreams. But today, something was different. There was an itch, small, quiet, but persistent, nestled somewhere deep inside his chest. It wasn't hunger. It wasn't tiredness. It was something else. He didn't know the word for it because he had never needed one. But if he had, it might have been curiosity. Snorlax turned his head slowly, surveying the world that had gone on living around him. The forest seemed brighter than he remembered. He could hear the trickle of a stream not far away, the gentle rustling of leaves, the chirping of distant Pokémon greeting the morning. Everything felt alive, moving, changing. And for the first time in his life, Snorlax felt like he was standing still, while everything else moved forward. He pushed himself to his feet, no small effort, considering his size, and wobbled slightly as he found his balance. Moss and leaves clung to his fur, and a few startled butterfree fluttered away from his back as he straightened up. The ground beneath him groaned in protest. He looked around again. Behind him was his resting spot, a soft patch of grass and earth that bore the perfect imprint of his massive form. It looked inviting, safe, familiar, peaceful. Ahead, the forest stretched endlessly, full of paths he had never taken, rivers he had never crossed, and mountains he had only seen from afar in his dreams. He took one heavy breath, then another, and then, without quite knowing why, Snorlax took his first step. It was a clumsy step. The earth shook slightly beneath his weight, and a few berries fell from nearby bushes. But it was a step nonetheless, a small, simple act that felt enormous in its meaning. The forest seemed to pause again, as if watching. He took another step, then another. And soon, Snorlax was walking. Slowly, steadily, and without any clear destination in mind. As he moved through the forest, Everything seemed new, even though it had been there all along. He noticed the smell of damp earth beneath his feet, the sweetness of blooming pecha flowers carried by the wind, and the faint shimmer of sunlight breaking through the leaves. Small Pokémon peeked out from hiding places to watch him go by. Caterpie, Sentret, Oddish, all whispering quietly among themselves. "Is he leaving?" one of them asked. "Snorlax never leaves," another replied. But Snorlax wasn't listening. He was following something invisible, something that tugged gently at the edge of his mind. A quiet voice, or maybe just a feeling, telling him that there was something out there he needed to see. After some time, he reached the stream he'd heard earlier. The water was clear and cold, running over smooth stones that sparkled in the sunlight. He knelt beside it, scooping up a handful of water in his massive paw and letting it trickle through his fingers. The sensation made him smile, though only slightly. It had been so long since he'd done anything like this that even the simplest action felt strange and wonderful. A Poliwag drifted nearby, watching him with wide, curious eyes. "Are you going somewhere?" it asked softly, its voice barely a ripple over the water. Snorlax thought for a moment. Then he shrugged. "Maybe." The Poliwag seemed puzzled. "Where?" Snorlax looked down at the stream, watching the reflection of the sky move over its surface. "I don't know," he said at last. "Just somewhere." The little Pokémon blinked, unsure how to respond. Most creatures knew exactly where they were going, to find food, to build nests, to meet others of their kind. But somewhere wasn't a place anyone had ever gone before. Snorlax didn't mind. The uncertainty felt oddly comfortable, like a nap you didn't plan to take. As the day went on, he wandered farther than he ever had before. He passed under towering trees whose roots twisted like sleeping serpents, across meadows humming with the low buzz of combi, and through clearings where the sun warmed his fur. Every step felt both new and familiar, as though the world had been waiting for him to notice it. At one point, he came across a patch of berries, round, red, and gleaming in the light. His eyes lit up. Instinctively, he plucked one and tasted it. It was sweet and tangy, with a flavor that made his whole body relax. He sat there for a while, eating slowly, savoring each bite. But even as he filled his stomach, that quiet feeling inside him remained. The food was good, better than he remembered, but it didn't fill the space he'd discovered within himself. When he finally stood again, the sun was beginning to lower in the sky. The forest glowed with golden light, and long shadows stretched between the trees. The sounds of the day softened, replaced by the gentle hum of evening. He walked until he reached a small hill, where the trees parted just enough to reveal a glimpse of the horizon. From there, Snorlax could see far beyond the forest, to the faint outline of mountains in the distance, their peaks dusted with snow that sparkled in the fading light. He sat down heavily, the ground sighing beneath him, and watched. He didn't know how long he sat there, but time seemed to stretch and bend around him. The air cooled, the colors dimmed, and one by one, stars began to appear in the deepening sky. It was quiet, but not the kind of quiet that came from sleep. It was the quiet of being awake for the first time, of noticing the world instead of dreaming it. Snorlax looked up at the stars. They shimmered softly, like tiny lights calling from far away. He wondered what it would be like to go where they were, to wander endlessly through the night sky, floating without weight or worry. The thought made him smile again, faintly, before a long, slow yawn escaped him. He leaned back against a tree and closed his eyes for just a moment. The forest around him exhaled, as if relieved to see him rest again. But though his body relaxed, his mind didn't drift off as easily this time. The images of rivers, mountains, and stars danced quietly in the back of his thoughts. Tomorrow, he decided, or maybe the day after, he would keep walking. He didn't know where the path would lead. Maybe to another forest, maybe to a village, maybe to the edge of the world, or maybe nowhere at all. But for the first time in his life, Snorlax felt like nowhere might be exactly the right place to go. And as the forest settled into its nightly rhythm, the soft chirping of cricket tot, the whisper of the wind through the leaves, the gentle lapping of the stream, Snorlax drifted somewhere between waking and sleep. The stars above blinked slowly, keeping watch, and the great creature smiled in his half-dreaming state. Because even though he didn't yet understand what he was searching for, he had already begun to find it, not in a destination, but in the simple act of taking the first step. Morning came softly, slipping between the trees, like a quiet thought. The forest stirred in gentle motions, dew trembling on leaves, light weaving its way through mist, the faint hum of waking life returning to the world, and in the middle of it all, Snorlax opened his eyes. He lay still for a while, blinking at the pale light above him. The air smelled of damp moss and sweet berries. His dreams faded slowly, images of clouds and rivers that had no beginning or end. He yawned, a long, deep sound that rolled through the forest like distant thunder. Birds startled, fluttering to new branches, but the moment soon settled into calm again. Snorlax sat up and looked around. The world seemed brighter than before, as if it had changed during the night. Or maybe he had. He didn't know. What he did know was that he was awake and still walking. The stream that had followed him yesterday glittered nearby, winding gently through the trees like a path of light. He stood, brushing off a few fallen leaves that clung to his fur. His stomach rumbled, but not out of urgency. It was simply part of being alive, a familiar sound. What truly caught his attention was the stream. It seemed to beckon him, to whisper softly through the rush of water, "Come and see." So, he followed it. The path beside the stream was uneven but kind. Roots curled under his feet like sleeping serpents, and the air was cool and forgiving. Every few steps he paused to listen. To the chirp of cricketot, the gentle tumble of water over stones, the breeze carrying the faint scent of blooming pecha flowers. For a creature who had spent most of his life asleep, the world was a symphony he was only now hearing for the first time. A few Pokémon watched as he passed. A group of Sentret perched on a fallen branch, whispering in awe. "He's walking again," one said. "Snorlax never walks," another replied. But their voices were small and distant, fading behind him as he continued on. Eventually, the forest opened into a clearing where sunlight pooled like warm honey. The stream spread wide here, becoming a calm, shallow river. Snorlax crouched by the water and cupped a handful in his paw, letting it slip between his fingers. It was cool, clean, alive. He smiled, faintly. Nearby, a tiny Poliwag splashed happily, sending ripples across the surface. "You came back," it said shyly. Snorlax nodded. "The river goes somewhere," he said, his voice deep and slow. "I think I'll see where." The Poliwag tilted its head. "Do you know what's there?" Snorlax shook his head. "No, but maybe that's the point." He stood again, water dripping from his paw, and looked downstream. The current curved away into the distance, vanishing behind tall reeds and soft hills. It was an invitation, gentle, but certain. The forest thinned as he followed the river's bend. Sunlight painted shifting patterns on his fur, and the air grew warmer. He found himself walking through stretches of golden grass, the ground softer, the horizon wider. It was the first time he'd seen the sky in full, an endless blue without ceiling or shadow. The sight made something in him expand, a quiet ache that wasn't hunger or sleepiness, but something deeper. He walked until he came across a fallen tree stretching across the river like a bridge. Moss covered its surface, soft and shining with dew. Snorlax hesitated. The water below was shallow, but crossing over it felt important somehow. A small test. He placed one foot on the log. It groaned under his weight, but held. Slowly, carefully, he took another step, then another. The river murmured beneath him, steady and patient. When he reached the other side, he turned back to look. He felt proud, though he couldn't say why. Maybe it was simply because he had done something new. Beyond the river lay open meadow. Grass brushed gently against his legs as he walked, and Butterfree drifted lazily through the air, their wings scattering specks of light. In the distance, small hills rolled like waves, and far beyond them, something shimmered, a faint glint of rooftops perhaps, or just the illusion of heat. Snorlax climbed one of the low hills and sat at the top, breathing deeply. The wind was soft, carrying scents of flowers and soil. He could still hear the river below, winding through the land, guiding him onward. For a long while, he just sat there, letting the sound of the world fill him. He had never realized how much life there was beyond sleep. The tiny movements, the layered sounds, the constant rhythm of things simply being. A small hoppip floated into view, caught on the breeze. It drifted close, turning slowly in the air. "You're big," it said cheerfully. Snorlax blinked, amused. "You're light," he replied. The hoppip giggled, spinning in a small circle. "Where are you going, big one?" Snorlax looked toward the horizon. "I don't know. Maybe where the river ends." "The wind goes far, too," said the hoppip. "But it never knows where it's going, either." It twirled once more and smiled. "Maybe that's how you find things." Snorlax smiled back. "Maybe." Then the wind caught the hoppip again, carrying it higher until it vanished into the bright sky. Snorlax watched it go, his gaze following the drifting shape until it was gone. For a moment, he felt something like understanding, a soft realization that the world wasn't about getting somewhere, but about moving at all. When he stood again, the sun had shifted westward. The shadows of the grass stretched long across the field, and the golden light of late afternoon bathed everything in calm warmth. The distant shimmer he had seen earlier now looked clearer. It was indeed a village, small and quiet, sitting at the river's edge. Snorlax hesitated. He had never been near people before. He had seen them only from afar, tiny figures walking through the forest, their laughter strange and fleeting. He wondered what they would think of him, if they would be afraid or curious, or simply too busy to notice. But the thought didn't frighten him. It just felt new. He began walking again, slower this time, more carefully. As he neared the edge of the meadow, the air changed. The scent of berries and flowers blended with a faint aroma of smoke and something sweet, fresh bread, perhaps. He could hear soft voices now, laughter, footsteps, the faint creak of wooden carts. The sounds were distant but warm, alive with their own rhythm. He stopped beside a wooden fence, marking the beginning of the village. Beyond it, small houses stood close together, their roofs red and their chimneys breathing thin ribbons of smoke. Children ran through the grass, chasing a Meowth that looked equally determined to escape. Snorlax watched quietly, hidden partly by the tall grass. He didn't want to frighten anyone. For a long while, he simply stood there, watching the life of the village unfold. He didn't understand it fully, the pattern of their movement, the reason for their laughter, but he felt something peaceful in it, something he couldn't name. It was a different kind of stillness than the forests, one built not from silence, but from gentle noise. Then, from one of the gardens near the riverbank, a small child noticed him. She froze mid-step, a basket of berries in her hands. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Snorlax's heart gave a slow, heavy thump. The girl's eyes widened, but instead of fear, they filled with wonder. "Snorlax!" she called suddenly, her voice high and bright. "It's a Snorlax!" Other villagers turned. A few gasped. One or two stepped back. But the girl laughed and waved, her small hand fluttering in the air like a leaf in wind. Snorlax blinked, unsure what to do. Then, slowly, awkwardly, he lifted his paw and waved back. A moment passed, then another, and the fear that had hung in the air began to fade. The villagers whispered among themselves, curious, but no longer afraid. Some smiled. A man by the river laughed quietly. "Well," he said, "looks like we've got a gentle giant visiting." Snorlax smiled, a big, slow smile that made his cheeks crease. The warmth of it surprised even him. He didn't move closer, didn't speak. He simply stood there, the river murmuring beside him, the sunlight fading into soft amber. Eventually, the child placed her basket down and rolled one of the berries toward him. It stopped at his feet. Snorlax looked at it for a long moment, then picked it up delicately and ate it. The taste was sweet and bright, just like her laughter. When he looked back, she was smiling. And for the first time since he'd left his sleeping place in the forest, Snorlax felt something new, something small and glowing deep inside. It wasn't hunger, and it wasn't tiredness. It was connection. A quiet thread between himself and the world around him. The sun slipped lower, painting the sky in soft gold and rose. Snorlax settled down near the fence, resting his back against the grass. The sounds of the village continued gently. Voices, footsteps, water, wind. His eyelids grew heavy, not from exhaustion, but from calm. He would rest here tonight, beside the river, where the sound of life was all around him. As he drifted between waking and sleep, he thought of the pollywag, of the hoppip, of the child, and her berry. The river kept flowing, its voice eternal. Somewhere beyond, more paths waited, more places, more faces, maybe even something like home. But for now, this was enough. And as the stars began to bloom in the twilight sky, Snorlax smiled faintly, whispering to himself before sleep took him once more. Maybe nowhere isn't so far after all. The evening settled gently over the village like a blanket of gold and quiet. The last rays of sunlight rested on rooftops and windows, then slowly withdrew into the soft blue of dusk. Smoke from the chimneys curled lazily upward, carrying with it the scent of cooked food and warmth. Along the narrow paths, villagers began to finish their day's work, closing shutters, sweeping porches, and calling their Pokémon home. And by the fence near the river, Snorlax sat in silence, watching. He had not moved much since the afternoon. The grass beneath him had flattened into a perfect shape that matched his round body, and his heavy tail had left a small groove in the earth. He wasn't asleep, not yet, but he was very still. The sound of the river beside him had become part of his breathing, a slow, rhythmic lullaby. Every so often he blinked, his eyes catching the glow of fireflies beginning to rise from the reeds. The village had not forgotten him. All through the evening, people came and went, quietly at first, curious but cautious. Children peeked from behind doorways. A few older villagers leaned on fences, whispering softly. Some Pokémon came closer, a curious Eevee, a gentle Mareep, and then retreated again. No one seemed afraid anymore. The sight of the great peaceful creature by the river had already become a kind of story whispered from house to house. As the sky deepened, the little girl from earlier returned. She carried another basket of berries, this time with a small lantern that glowed softly like a captured star. She stopped a few steps from Snorlax and looked up at him. "Hi again," she said, her voice warm but quiet. Snorlax lowered his gaze, his expression slow and gentle. "Hello," he rumbled, the word like distant thunder softened by kindness. She smiled and held out a berry. "You like them, right? These are Oran berries. My mom says they're good for energy." Snorlax blinked, tilting his head. "Energy," he repeated. It was a word he had never really needed before. His days had always been full of sleep, and sleep had always been enough. But he took the berry carefully from her hand and ate it. The taste was sweet, a little tangy, and full of warmth. He nodded slowly. "Good." The girl laughed softly. "You talk slow," she said, though not unkindly. Snorlax chuckled, the sound deep and rumbling. "I think slow, too." That made her giggle, and for a moment they both stayed there, sharing a quiet laugh under the fading light. Then she sat down on the grass beside him, her small lantern glowing between them. The light reflected in Snorlax's eyes like twin moons. "What's your name?" she asked after a while. "Snorlax," he said. She nodded thoughtfully. "I'm Lyra." They sat together for a time without words. The sounds of the village drifted around them, doors closing, voices fading. the soft splash of a fishing rod in the river. The air cooled as night deepened, carrying the smell of damp soil and wood smoke. Fireflies shimmered along the riverbank, their lights blinking in slow rhythm like breathing. Lyra tilted her head. "Where are you going, Snorlax?" He looked at the river. Its surface caught the last glimmers of the sky, flowing calmly into the dark beyond the fields. "I don't know," he said quietly. "The river goes somewhere. Maybe I'll go too." She thought about that, resting her chin on her knees. "You don't know where?" He shook his head. "No. Are you scared?" Snorlax blinked slowly, thinking. "No," he said at last. I'm curious." Lyra smiled at that. "My dad says curious people find good things, even if they don't know what they're looking for." Snorlax smiled faintly. "Maybe your dad is right." They sat a while longer, listening to the river. Somewhere in the distance, a chemecho rang its soft, musical notes from the edge of the village. The sound drifted over them, slow and delicate, like glass touched by wind. Lyra hummed along to it, her voice small but sweet. Snorlax closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to listen more closely. The song of the chemecho, the hum of insects, the breathing of the earth. It all blended into something that felt ancient, endless. It reminded him of the forest, but different. The forest had been quiet because it slept. The village was quiet because it was alive in its rest. After a while, Lyra stood and dusted her dress. "I should go back," she said. "My mom will worry." She picked up her basket but left the lantern beside Snorlax. "You can keep that. It'll help you if it gets dark." Snorlax looked at the little light and then at her. "Thank you." She smiled again. "Good night, Snorlax." "Good night, Lyra." She ran off down the path, her small figure fading into the warm glow of the village lights. Snorlax watched until she disappeared, then turned his eyes back to the lantern. It flickered softly beside him, painting the grass in gold. He reached out one paw, not to move it, but just to feel its warmth. It was faint but steady, like a heartbeat. He leaned back against the fence and looked up at the night sky. Stars had begun to appear, first one, then another, then countless more, until the heavens were full. They shone quietly, their light older than memory. Snorlax thought about the Hoppip's words from the meadow. The wind goes far, too, but it never knows where it's going. He wondered if the stars were like that too, always wandering, always shining, never needing to arrive anywhere. The thought comforted him. Maybe he was like them, in his own slow way. As the night deepened, the village fell into stillness. Only a few windows glowed faintly, and the sounds of the day faded into soft murmurs. Snorlax listened to them, his breathing slowing to match the rhythm of the world. Every now and then, a gentle breeze passed through, carrying the faint scent of baked bread and lavender. He didn't feel the usual pull of sleep yet. His body was tired, yes, but his mind was awake in a way he had never known before. The world felt wide, and for the first time, he wanted to see all of it. Not for food, not for rest, but simply to be there. Then, from the other side of the river, movement caught his eye. A small light, not from a lantern, but from something alive, floated above the water. It was a Pokémon, a glowing blue orb with wings that shimmered like glass. An Illumise, dancing gently over the river's surface. More lights soon joined it, Volbeat and Illumise weaving together in slow, graceful circles, painting the darkness with trails of silver and green. Snorlax watched, entranced. Their dance was soft, wordless, and full of purpose that didn't need explaining. He didn't know what they were saying to each other, but he understood the feeling. It was peace. It was belonging. A small smile spread across his face. The lantern beside him flickered, echoing the rhythm of the lights across the water. After a long while, the dance ended. The glowing Pokémon drifted higher into the air, then scattered back into the trees. The river returned to its quiet song. Snorlax's eyes grew heavy at last. He pulled the lantern a little closer, its warm light pooling against his chest, and settled his head back against the fence. As he drifted toward sleep, his thoughts wandered, of the forest, of the Poliwag, of the meadow, and the child, with her basket of berries. Each memory glowed softly, like the lantern's light. He didn't know where the river would take him next, or what lay beyond the village. But that uncertainty no longer felt empty. It felt full, like the beginning of something vast and gentle. The stars shimmered above him, the river whispered, and Snorlax smiled, his breathing deep and even. Before sleep took him completely, a last thought passed through his mind, as simple as it was true. The world is bigger when you stay awake to see it. Then, finally, Snorlax slept. Not the deep, dreamless sleep of before, but the light, peaceful kind that carries you gently through the night. And beside him, the little lantern burned on, steady and bright, keeping quiet watch until morning. Morning came softly to the village, carried on the hush of cool wind and the faint scent of river mist. The first light of dawn crept across the rooftops, turning dewdrops into tiny stars and painting the river in pale silver. From the fields beyond, the song of early Pidgey rose gently, blending with the far-off murmur of waking voices. By the fence, where he had rested through the night, Snorlax stirred. His eyes opened slowly, blinking at the brightness of a new day. The small lantern beside him still glowed faintly, its flame reduced to a sleepy ember. He smiled at the sight of it, remembering Lyra's voice as she handed it to him. "It'll help you if it gets dark." He sat up with a deep stretch, his arms reaching toward the soft blue sky. His joints popped quietly, and a contented sigh escaped him. The river flowed nearby, its sound steady and familiar. For the first time since leaving the forest, Snorlax felt something close to belonging, not quite home, but not far from it either. A group of villagers were already out and about. 2 fishermen stood knee-deep in the river, casting lines with quiet focus. A woman carried baskets of herbs toward a small shop. Children chased each other near the fence, their laughter skipping across the morning air like stones on water. When they noticed Snorlax moving, their play stopped for a moment. A few eyes widened, but then recognition replaced surprise. The big creature who had appeared yesterday wasn't a threat. He was a story now, a familiar sight. One of the children waved timidly. "Good morning, Snorlax." The words made him pause. No one had ever greeted him before. Not in the forest. Not in his long, dream-heavy years of sleep. He blinked, then lifted a heavy paw and waved back. "Good morning," he rumbled. His voice, deep and slow, rolled through the air like a kind drumbeat. The children giggled and ran off again, shouting to each other about how friendly he was. Snorlax smiled faintly, his eyes following them. Something warm bloomed quietly inside him, a gentle recognition that he had somehow become part of their morning. The scent of baking bread drifted from the nearest house. It was rich and soft, almost sweet. His stomach gave a lazy growl, but it wasn't the sharp pang of hunger. It was more like curiosity in another form, wondering what bread might taste like. Not far away, Lyra appeared, carrying a wooden tray. She waved when she saw him and ran across the grass. "You're still here," she said, smiling. "Mom said you could come by the bakery if you're hungry." Snorlax blinked. "Bakery? Where we make bread," she explained proudly. "And muffins, and pies sometimes." Snorlax nodded slowly. "That sounds nice. Come on," she said, beckoning. He hesitated at first. The houses looked small and delicate compared to him. He didn't want to break anything or frighten anyone. But Lyra seemed certain, and her voice carried that simple kind of trust that left no room for worry. So, carefully, he followed her. Each of his steps was deliberate. The ground shook slightly, but no one seemed alarmed. Villagers paused in their work to watch him pass. Some waved, others smiled. Even the older ones, who had looked uncertain the day before, nodded in greeting now. When he reached the bakery, the smell became overwhelming, in the best possible way. It wrapped around him like warmth itself. A small wooden sign hung above the door, painted with a loaf of bread and a smiling Slurpuff. Lyra's mother stood in the doorway, flour dusted on her apron, and a kind expression on her face. "So this is the traveler," she said, wiping her hands on a towel. Snorlax bowed his head politely. "Snorlax," he said. "Ah, well met, Snorlax," she replied. "You've made my daughter quite fond of you." Lyra laughed, hiding behind her tray. "He talks funny," she whispered. Her mother smiled. "He talks honest." Then, she turned back to Snorlax. "You look like you could use something to eat." He didn't deny it. A moment later, she handed him a round loaf of bread, still warm from the oven. Snorlax took it carefully, holding it between two fingers as though it were fragile. The surface was golden, the crust slightly crisp. He sniffed it, then took a cautious bite. The taste filled his mouth with simple joy. Soft, earthy, rich. It melted into warmth that seemed to spread through his entire body. He blinked in surprise. "It's very good," Lyra's mother laughed. "Bread usually is, especially when you've walked as far as you have." Snorlax nodded slowly. "The river brought me here," he said after a moment. "The river brings many things," she replied. "Water, fish, travelers, stories." She wiped her hands again and looked at him kindly. "And maybe you're one of those stories too." He thought about that while he finished his bread. The idea of being a story felt strange, but not unpleasant. Maybe journeys were stories told by the feet instead of the mouth. After a while, Snorlax thanked them with a slow nod and returned to the riverside. He sat again beneath the same patch of shade as the day before, the lantern still beside him. The village moved around him like a quiet melody. People worked, children played, and the river flowed on, endless and calm. A few Pokémon wandered near him, an Azurill bouncing along the water's edge, a pair of Bidoof carrying twigs to repair a dam downstream. Snorlax watched them with quiet fascination. Everyone, it seemed, had something to do, some purpose that fit neatly into the rhythm of the day. He wondered what his was. He had always thought his purpose was to rest, to eat, to sleep, to exist peacefully. But now, that didn't feel complete anymore. His journey had started without a reason, but maybe it was slowly finding one. Not a destination, perhaps, but a direction. A small sound pulled him from his thoughts. It was a tune, a gentle hum carried by the breeze. Lyra was sitting by the river, skipping small stones across the surface. The ripples glimmered in the sunlight, spreading in perfect circles. "Do you ever get tired of walking?" she asked, not looking up. Snorlax thought about it. "Sometimes," he said. "But when I stop, I wonder what comes next." She nodded. "That's how I feel when I draw. I don't know what it'll look like until it's done." He liked that comparison. The world was like a drawing still being made. Lines not yet finished, colors waiting to be filled in. Maybe walking was just another way of drawing a line. As the morning passed, the village settled into its rhythm. Farmers led toros toward the fields, shopkeepers opened their doors, and fishermen brought in their first catches of the day. The air filled with the scent of earth, flower, and water, a gentle harmony of life continuing. Snorlax watched it all, feeling the stillness inside him grow lighter, softer. For the first time, he didn't feel like an outsider. He was simply another piece of the morning, slow, content, part of the flow. Lyra stood and brushed her hands against her dress. "Will you keep following the river today?" she asked. He looked downstream, where the water curved out of sight. "I think so," he said. "There's more to see. Will you come back?" Snorlax smiled, slow and kind. "Maybe, if the river allows it," she grinned. "Then I'll keep your lantern ready." He rose to his feet, towering gently over the grass. The ground trembled as he took his first step. But the sound was almost soothing now, a rhythm the village had come to know. People waved as he passed. A few children followed him to the edge of the fields, laughing and calling out goodbyes. When he reached the river's bend, he turned once more. The village shimmered in the light, smoke rising from chimneys, rooftops glinting, water catching the sunday. It looked small now, but full of life, full of meaning. Snorlax lifted a paw in farewell. "Thank you," he said softly, though no one was close enough to hear. Then he turned back to the river. It flowed steady and sure, whispering of distant lands and unseen skies. He followed it, step by step, his reflection moving beside him in the clear water. The day stretched before him, bright, open, full of quiet promise. He didn't know where the river would lead, but for the first time, he didn't mind not knowing. The journey itself had become its own kind of peace, and as the sounds of the village faded behind him, replaced by the rustle of reeds and the song of wind through the grass, Snorlax smiled. He was still the same creature, slow, hungry sometimes, fond of rest, but something inside him had shifted. He was awake now, truly awake, and the world seemed endless. Somewhere ahead the river curved toward new lands. He would follow it as far as it wished to go. And behind him, in the heart of the small, kind village, a lantern waited by the fence, its flame steady, its light ready to guide him home again someday. The river stretched onward, winding lazily through a wide open land. Gone were the clustered rooftops and curling smoke of the village. Now there was only space, vast and golden, rippling like an ocean made of grass. The plains breathed beneath the wind, a slow and endless motion that whispered softly as Snorlax walked. He had never seen so far in all his life. The horizon rolled outward in every direction, gentle and blue at its edges, blurring where the land met the sky. The morning sun had grown warmer, spreading over him like a calm hand. With every step, his shadow followed, a round, soft shape moving slowly over the waving fields. The river kept him company, glimmering to his right. Sometimes it disappeared into dips in the land, only to return again, sparkling in the light. Small Pokémon darted along its banks, Lotad floating in clusters, a Quagsire half submerged and smiling as if lost in thought. Snorlax found himself smiling too. His journey had become quieter. There were no voices here, no laughter or footsteps but his own. Yet the silence wasn't empty. It was peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that carried sound in small, meaningful ways. The rustle of wind in tall grass, the distant cry of a staraptor, the slow lap of water against stones. As he walked, Snorlax thought about the village. He remembered the smell of bread, the laughter of children, Lyra's bright eyes, and her small lantern glowing beside him. He wondered what she was doing now. Maybe she was sitting by the river again, waiting for him to return. The thought made his steps feel lighter. Around midday, the plains changed color. The golden grass gave way to patches of green dotted with wildflowers. White, purple, and pale yellow. Butterfree drifted between them, their wings flashing in the sunlight. The air smelled faintly of honey and rain. Snorlax paused by a cluster of stones and sat down. The ground was warm beneath him, and the breeze carried the coolness of distant hills. He reached into his small pouch, where he had tucked away one of the loaves the baker had given him. He took a slow bite, savoring it. The taste brought back the morning he had left, the kindness of strangers, the feeling of being welcome. After eating, he leaned back and closed his eyes, letting the warmth of the sun sink into his fur. He didn't fall asleep. Instead, he listened. Somewhere nearby, a cricket tune played its lilting song. The melody rose and fell like a sigh, blending with the wind. It struck him how full the world was of music. Not the kind people made with instruments, but the kind that simply happened. The creak of trees, the hum of insects, the steady rhythm of the river. He had been too deep in sleep all his life to hear it before. Now, each sound felt like a small gift. After a while, Snorlax opened his eyes and noticed a faint shape on the horizon, a hill, higher than the others, crowned with something glinting in the light. He stood and began walking again, curiosity stirring within him. The plains stretched on endlessly, but Snorlax didn't mind. His pace was steady, unhurried, as though the land itself moved with him. A flock of swablu drifted overhead, their soft feathers catching the sunlight like clouds come to life. One of them dipped lower, circling curiously before returning to the group. Snorlax raised a paw in quiet greeting. By late afternoon, he reached the hill. Up close, it was covered in wild grass and dotted with stones shaped by years of wind and rain. At the top stood a single tree, tall, quiet, and old. Beneath it lay a small pond, fed by a spring that bubbled gently from the rocks. Snorlax climbed slowly, his steps making the earth tremble softly. When he reached the top, he stood for a long moment, looking around. From there, he could see everything. The long line of the river glinting in the distance, the endless plains, and far away to the west, a faint blur of mountains touching the sky. He sat beside the pond and looked into its clear water. His reflection stared back at him, round, calm, familiar. But behind it, in the rippling surface, he thought he saw something else, movement, faint and shifting, like another version of himself walking somewhere unseen. He blinked, and it vanished. Snorlax dipped one paw into the pond. The water was cool, alive with tiny ripples that spread outward. He cupped some and brought it to his mouth. It tasted pure, almost sweet. Then, from behind the tree, came a soft rustling sound. Snorlax turned his head and saw a small Pokémon emerge, a Leafeon, its fur blending with the grass, its eyes bright and steady. It stepped forward slowly, watching him, without fear. "Hello," Snorlax said. The Leafeon tilted its head. "Hello, traveler," it replied, in a voice like wind through leaves. Snorlax blinked in surprise. He hadn't expected a reply, but something about this place felt older than words, like it had seen many travelers before. "You came from far away," the Leafeon continued. "I could hear your steps across the plains." Snorlax nodded. "I came from the forest, then a village. Now, here." The Leafeon studied him for a moment. "You walk without knowing where you're going." "Yes," Snorlax said simply. "But I keep finding places that feel like they've been waiting for me." The Leafeon smiled, a small, knowing expression. "That's because you move slowly enough to see them." It circled the pond gracefully, its leaf-like tail brushing the grass. "Most travelers hurry. They pass by everything worth finding." Snorlax thought about that. "I was always told I sleep too much, but maybe slow isn't bad." "Slow is seeing," said the Leafeon. "The plains don't change for those who rush, but for those who walk gently, they show their stories." Snorlax nodded, feeling the truth of those words settle in him like warmth. The Leafeon paused beside the pond. "You should stay here for the night," it said. "The plains can be wide and lonely in darkness. The tree will watch over you." Snorlax looked up at the branches swaying above. They reached like arms, their leaves whispering softly. "Thank you," he said. The Leafeon bowed slightly. "Rest well, traveler." Then it turned and vanished into the tall grass, its form melting into the color of the plains until it was gone. Snorlax watched the spot for a while, then lay down beneath the tree. The sky above had begun to shift, the blue fading into shades of orange and rose. The plains below glowed with the last light of day, each blade of grass catching fire in the sun's farewell. He watched it all in silence. The wind carried faint scents, flowers, water, and something distant he couldn't name. The pond shimmered beside him, mirroring the sky. As dusk deepened, the first stars began to appear. He thought again of the Leafeon's words. Slow is seeing. Maybe that was why his journey mattered. Not to reach something, but to see what was already there, to notice the small lives, the kind gestures, the way light changed over the water. He pulled Lyra's lantern from his pouch and placed it by the pond. Its glow joined the reflection of the stars, a small human light among nature's endless ones. The night grew cool and still. Crickets began their song, joined by the low murmur of the spring. Snorlax felt his eyelids grow heavy. The tree above creaked softly in the wind, as if speaking in a language older than time. Before sleep came, he whispered to the night, "Thank you for waiting." And the plains answered in their own quiet way, with a sigh of grass, a shimmer of stars, and the endless, gentle sound of water. When morning came, the plains were covered in a thin silver mist. It hung low over the grass, curling softly around the roots of the old tree where Snorlax had slept. Dew sparkled on every blade, catching the first touch of sunlight like tiny shards of glass. The pond beside him was still, so still that the sky seemed to float upon it. Snorlax stirred, blinking slowly as he sat up. For a few moments, he didn't move. The air was cool and full of silence, the kind that made every sound, every drop of water, every wing beat feel meaningful. He looked toward the horizon. The hills in the distance were veiled in pale blue light. Between them he could see the faint shimmer of something moving, perhaps wind, perhaps light, perhaps both. He rose to his feet, stretching, the movement slow and deep. The great tree above him whispered in response, its leaves trembling gently. Snorlax placed a paw on its trunk. "Thank you," he murmured, remembering the Leafeon's words from the night before. Then he turned toward the direction of the shimmer. The plains were calling again. The journey that day felt lighter. The earth was soft beneath his steps, and every gust of wind brushed against his fur like a friendly hand. The mist began to lift, unveiling the wide landscape in hues of gold and green. Far ahead, the river curved once more, though now its sound was faint, a companion, still near, though unseen. As the hours passed, the wind grew stronger. It rolled across the plains in waves, bending the tall grasses, carrying with it the songs of distant Pokémon. Sometimes it came warm, smelling of earth and flowers. Sometimes cool, like the breath of mountains unseen. Snorlax noticed how the sound of the wind changed as he walked. Sometimes it hummed low, sometimes it whistled, sometimes it almost seemed to form shapes within the air. There were moments when it felt alive, as though it were speaking softly, saying words he could almost understand. By midday, he reached the stretch of land where the grass grew shorter and the soil turned to smooth stone. Scattered across the plain were hundreds of large rocks, some round, others sharp, all shaped by time and weather. They stood like silent watchers facing the horizon. Between them, the wind moved in strange ways, whirling, echoing, carrying whispers. Snorlax slowed his steps, listening. At first, it was only sound, a long sigh, a low hum, a soft cry that rose and faded. But the longer he stood there, the clearer it became. "Come, slow one." He blinked, his ears twitching. The words were faint, drifting like smoke, yet he was sure he had heard them. The wind brushed his face again, curling around him as if circling. It carried a different whisper this time, gentle, almost melodic. "Walk with us." Snorlax turned slowly, his eyes scanning the space between the stones. He saw no one, only the shimmering air and the endless plains beyond. Still, he followed the sound. The wind led him deeper into the stone field. Each gust seemed to nudge him forward, and the whispers grew clearer. Sometimes they sounded like words, sometimes like sighs, sometimes like laughter hidden in the air. As he walked, he began to notice the patterns. The stones weren't placed randomly. They formed faint spirals and lines, stretching across the plain like an ancient design. In the very center stood a ring of tall stones, smooth and pale, humming softly with the wind's touch. When Snorlax stepped inside the ring, everything changed. The wind no longer blew past him, it moved through him. He could feel it in his chest, in his fur, in his very breath. It wasn't cold or harsh, it was alive, full of sound and memory. For a moment, he closed his eyes. The whispers surrounded him now, clearer than ever. They didn't sound like voices of people or Pokémon. They sounded older, like the plains themselves speaking through the air. You walk with no destination. You sleep, then wake, then see. The world remembers the slow ones. Snorlax listened, unmoving. He didn't try to answer. The wind didn't seem to need words in return. Then came another whisper, softer than the rest, curling right beside his ear. "Do you remember before the forest?" Snorlax frowned slightly. Before the forest? He tried to think. His life before that felt like fog, Long stretches of sleep, of stillness, of dreams, without shape. He could remember the smell of moss, the taste of sunlight, the hum of the ground beneath him. But before that, there was nothing. You were part of the first breath, the wind said, its tone like music fading in the distance. The world sleeps and wakes as you do. He felt something stirred deep within him, not understanding exactly, but a recognition that went beyond thought. He had always believed his life began with waking up beneath a tree, but maybe it had begun long before that. Maybe his rest and his waking were both part of something much larger. The same rhythm that made the wind move, the grass grow, the rivers flow. The air around him shimmered, filled with swirling motes of light. The stones hummed in harmony, their tones low and steady. It wasn't frightening, it was peaceful. It felt like the world breathing. Snorlax took a deep breath himself, slow and deep. And as he exhaled, the light began to fade. The whispers softened. Walk, slow one. See more. Remember gently. Then, silence. The wind fell still for a heartbeat, and when it returned, it was just wind again, soft, natural, ordinary. Snorlax opened his eyes. The plains looked the same, yet different somehow. The air felt clearer. The sky above seemed wider, as though the world had stretched while he stood there. He looked down at his paws and smiled faintly. The dust of the plains clung to them, glowing faintly in the sunlight. He brushed them together, the sound quiet and grounding. For a long moment, he stood among the stones, simply breathing. The whispers were gone, but they had left something behind. A calm understanding that didn't need words. When he finally began walking again, the wind followed, gentle now, playful. It tugged at the leaves, carried dandelion seeds past his face, and rustled the tall grass as though guiding him forward. By late afternoon, the stone field faded behind him. The plains opened once more into rolling hills dotted with wildflowers. The air smelled fresh, alive, touched by everything that had passed through it. He paused at a small rise, looking back one last time. The ring of stones stood silent in the distance, bathed in soft light. The wind moved around them, whispering endlessly to no one and everyone at once. Snorlax smiled. "I'll listen," he said quietly, more to the air than to himself. He continued walking until the sun began to set. The sky turned orange and pink, and long shadows stretched across the land. When he found a gentle slope overlooking the river again, he sat down to rest. The breeze brushed against him one more time, softer now, like a friend saying good night. He thought of the Leafeon's words, "Slow is seeing," and now, he thought, "Wind is remembering." As stars began to appear above, he pulled Lyra's lantern from his pouch and set it beside him. Its small glow joined the twilight, trembling in the breath of the wind. Snorlax leaned back, eyes half closed. The plains spread endlessly before him. The wind whispered again, not in words this time, but in feeling. A promise, a lullaby. And Snorlax, smiling faintly, whispered back to the night, "I'll keep walking, slowly." Then he rested, not asleep, not awake, just perfectly still in the quiet balance between them, listening to the world breathe. The plains grew softer as Snorlax continued his slow, steady walk. The wind from the whispering stones had quieted now, reduced to a gentle sigh brushing through the grass. For the first time in days, the air carried the sound of running water again, the familiar voice of the river. It had returned to meet him, glimmering between slopes of green. The sight made Snorlax's heart lift slightly. The river had been with him since the start, winding patiently through his journey like an old friend who walked at his pace. Every bend, every ripple, every reflection had told him something new about the world and about himself. As he approached the riverbank, the sound deepened. It wasn't the calm trickle of the plains anymore. It was stronger now, louder, filled with purpose. The water ran faster, restless, as if it too were approaching a decision. And indeed, not far ahead, the river began to split. From where Snorlax stood, he could see it clearly. The water flowed forward until it met a great cluster of rocks, then divided in two. One branch curved left, narrow and calm, winding toward a line of trees that shimmered faintly in the distance. The other flowed right, wide and bright, rushing toward open land where the wind never stopped moving. A fork. Snorlax stopped at the edge of the water, his reflection trembling beneath him. The sound of the two branches filled the air, a harmony and a contrast, two songs of the same river, both calling in their own way. He sat down on the soft grass and watched the water move. The sunlight sparkled on its surface, breaking into countless points of light that danced and vanished. Somewhere inside, he felt the faint tug of indecision. For so long, he had simply followed the river without thought. It had led him from the forest to the village, from the village to the plains, from the plains to the whispering winds. He had never needed to choose before. Now, for the first time, the river offered him two directions, and both looked right. The left branch was quiet. The trees beyond it swayed gently, their leaves dark with promise. It looked peaceful, shaded, a place that would welcome rest and reflection. The right branch, though, was alive, glittering, rushing, full of motion and light. It seemed to lead toward distance, toward something wild and unknown. Snorlax lowered his head, thinking. "Which way do you go?" he murmured to the river. The water answered only with its endless flowing, its song shifting between tones as it split around the rocks. After a while, he lay back on the grass, eyes turned toward the sky. The clouds drifted slowly above, lazy and white. He watched them and thought of the Leafeon's words. Slow is seeing. The wind's whispers echoed faintly in his mind as well. The world remembers the slow ones. Maybe the choice didn't matter as much as the way he walked it. Maybe whichever path he took, he would still find what he needed, because he was learning to see. Still, his eyes moved between the two branches. He wanted to listen to them, to understand. The left side murmured softly, like a lullaby. He could almost imagine hearing voices there, the laughter of the village children, the creak of wooden bridges, the hush of forests at dawn. It reminded him of everything gentle in his journey so far. The right side, however, roared faintly with energy. It spoke of storms, of sunlit fields, of horizons he hadn't yet reached. It was untamed. It felt alive in a way that stirred something deep in him. He sat up again, the decision still unspoken. The river rushed on, indifferent yet kind, carrying his reflection down both ways. Then, from the grass nearby, a small movement caught his eye. A whooper emerged, blinking curiously in the light. Its skin shimmered blue, and it looked up at him with wide, friendly eyes. "Hello," Snorlax said, lowering his voice. The whooper tilted its head. "You're big," it said cheerfully, "and you don't look lost." Snorlax smiled faintly. "Maybe not lost," he said, "just choosing." The whooper hopped closer, peering at the fork. "Oh, the river splits there. It's always done that. One side goes to the woods, the other to the open lands. They both end up somewhere beautiful, I think." Snorlax looked at it, surprised. "You've seen both?" The whooper shook its head, laughing. "No, but the river told me." "The river told you?" "Yes," the little creature chirped. "If you listen when the water slows down, it tells stories. Sometimes it talks about places it's been, other times about things it's seen. It remembers everything." Snorlax blinked slowly. "Maybe I should listen better." The whooper nodded enthusiastically. "Always listen. The river likes that." Then, without another word, it hopped into the shallows and began to drift downstream toward the faster, brighter branch. Snorlax watched it disappear into the current. For a long time, he sat there, listening. The river murmured to itself, soft and constant, and if he listened closely enough, he thought he could hear the faint echo of the whooper's laughter carried away by the water. He stood at last, the decision forming naturally, without effort. The right branch, bright, alive, unpredictable, called to him. Not because it was easier or louder, but because it was moving. He had been still for so much of his life. Maybe it was time to follow something that refused to stay still. Before leaving, Snorlax knelt by the left branch and placed one paw gently in the water. "Thank you," he whispered, as if to the path he wasn't taking. Maybe another time. Then he turned toward the right. The wind shifted, brushing against him as if in quiet approval. He began to walk, his heavy steps steady and sure, the ground soft beneath his feet. The land changed quickly. The plains gave way to open fields where wildflowers grew in thick patches, their colors blazing in. The afternoon Sunday. The river beside him ran clear and strong, its current alive with silver flashes of fish. He followed its edge, keeping pace with the flow. Sometimes he would stop to watch it leap over rocks, sending mist into the air. Sometimes he'd rest beneath a lone tree, feeling the ground hum with quiet energy. As the day wore on, the path began to rise. Low hills rolled ahead, dotted with boulders and clumps of tall grass. From the top of one hill, Snorlax looked back and saw both branches of the river glinting in the light, spreading like silver threads across the land. For the first time, he realized how far he had come and how far he still could go. He thought of the forest, of the Poliwag who had watched him wake. He thought of the village and Lyra's lantern glowing beside the riverbank. He thought of the Leafeon beneath the old tree and the wind whispering his name among the stones. Every place, every being, every sound. It was all part of one long breath of the world, and he was part of it too. The hills grew steeper as the sun dipped lower, painting everything in warm gold. The river curved beside him, calmer now, as though tired from its rush. When he reached the top of the highest hill, he stopped and looked down. Below, the water spilled into a wide basin where the plains opened again, this time dotted with shimmering pools and reeds. The air was thick with the hum of life. Wingull glided above the water, and in the shallows, he could see silhouettes of Pokémon moving slowly. The scene was quiet but full, alive but gentle. It was a place of balance, where motion met stillness, where sound met silence. Snorlax descended the hill slowly, his eyes half closed against the glow of the setting Sunday. When he reached the water's edge, he sat once more, the river curving before him like a path that never truly ended. He dipped his paw into the current. The water here was cooler, faster. It pressed against him, eager to go on. "I'll follow," he murmured softly, "for as long as you lead." The river shimmered, as if in answer, the ripples catching the last light of day. Snorlax leaned back, watching the sky change color. The horizon burned orange, then softened into rose, then deepened into the quiet blue of evening. The world felt vast again, but no longer lonely. He closed his eyes, breathing slowly, letting the rhythm of the water fill his chest. The sound of the current blended with the faint hum of insects, with the sigh of the wind returning to touch his fur. And when the first stars appeared, he whispered to himself, "There are many paths, but all flow the same way." The night settled around him, warm and gentle. Somewhere downstream, the river continued its endless journey, carrying reflections of the stars and the slow, steady echo of Snorlax's steps, walking toward whatever waited beyond the next horizon. The night passed gently over the plains, leaving behind a dawn wrapped in mist. The river's current glimmered faintly in the early light, carrying tiny reflections of the stars that had faded only hours before. Snorlax stirred slowly, lifting his head from the soft grass. His eyes, heavy but aware, followed the gentle sway of reeds beside the water. The air smelled of damp earth and fresh growth. It was quiet, but full of subtle life, the hum of insects, the soft rustle of leaves, the distant calls of waking Pokémonday. Snorlax stretched, a deep, satisfying motion, and began to walk once more. The river curved ahead, and as he followed its path, he noticed the landscape subtly change. The plains gave way to scattered pools of water, small at first, then larger, each shimmering in the morning light, like pieces of the sky scattered across the earth. The water was clear, smooth, and still, reflecting everything above with perfect clarity. Wildflowers grew along the edges, their petals trembling in the light breeze. Dragonflies skimmed across the surface, their wings sparkling as they moved. Snorlax paused at the edge of the first pool. He crouched slightly and gazed into its mirrored surface. He saw his reflection, round, calm, familiar, but also the reflection of the world around him, the rising sun, the tall grasses, and the gentle slope leading to more pools beyond. He dipped a paw into the water. Ripples radiated outward, distorting the reflection for a moment before the surface returned to perfect clarity. The sensation was cool and gentle, a reminder that the river and its pools were alive, even in their stillness. As he walked between the pools, he noticed life moving quietly beneath the water. Small Pokémon slipped through the shallows, barely visible. A shy Marill, a curious Lotad, and tiny Piplup diving with the joy of play. Snorlax watched them, slow and steady, appreciating the way each creature moved without hurry. Here, there was no rush. The river had split earlier, the currents had chosen their own paths, and yet everything seemed in balance. The water reflected not just the sky but the peace of the world, the calm that comes when movement and stillness coexist. He walked from pool to pool, each more beautiful than the last. In some, the surface shimmered with a golden glow from the sun. In others, the shadows of clouds drifted lazily across, painting patterns on the water. Snorlax moved carefully, aware of the delicate life at the edges of each pool. Tadpoles curling in the shallows, small Wingull dipping low, and even a few sleepy Poliwag resting near the reeds. By midday, he reached a large pool nestled in a slight depression of the land. The water was so clear and deep that it seemed almost endless. Above, a great heron circled, its wings casting soft shadows on the surface below. Snorlax approached slowly, sitting on the grass at the edge. He could feel the coolness radiating from the water. The sun warmed his back, the wind brushed his fur, and the silence of the pool was full, complete, like a moment held in time. Snorlax leaned closer and touched the water gently. It rippled in waves, small and circular, spreading across the surface before vanishing. He watched until the last movement disappeared, leaving perfect reflection once again. Something in the pool caught his attention, a small shimmer below the surface, moving in a graceful arc. He blinked and leaned closer. A new Pokémon emerged slowly, shy and delicate, unlike any he had seen before. Its scales reflected light in muted tones of blue and silver, blending almost seamlessly with the water. It was a Lumineon, drifting gently, curious, yet cautious. Snorlax smiled faintly, lowering himself closer to the pool, without disturbing the water too much. "Hello," he said softly. The Lumineon paused, observing him with luminous eyes. Its movements were fluid and quiet, deliberate yet playful. After a moment, it glided closer, circling Snorlax's reflection. The water shimmered with each movement, creating patterns of light that danced over his fur. He watched, mesmerized, feeling the calm energy of the pool flow into him. The world here was slow, deliberate, full of motion that required patience to see. He realized the river's fork had led him to this place for a reason, not for speed, not for discovery, but for observation. The slow ones, indeed, saw what others might miss. As the hours passed, more Pokémon emerged from the surrounding reeds. A quiet Chinchou, its bioluminescent feelers glowing faintly, a pair of Psyduck paddling along the edges, and a shy Lotad, peeking from beneath a lily pad. None were afraid of Snorlax. None rushed away. Here, his presence was not intrusive. It was part of the rhythm, just another slow heartbeat in a world that appreciated patience. Snorlax settled by the largest pool, resting his head on his paws. The water mirrored the sky above, soft clouds drifting slowly, the sun climbing higher. Each ripple, each movement, seemed meaningful, carrying a story he could almost understand. He thought again of the village, of Lyra and her lantern, of the plains and the wind that whispered in the stones. Every step of his journey had brought him here, not to conquer or to own, but to witness, to see. By afternoon, the sun began to tilt lower, casting long golden reflections across the water. The pools shimmered like scattered mirrors, each capturing a slice of the sky, a memory of light. Snorlax traced the reflections with his paw, sending tiny ripples dancing across the surface. He realized that even when he moved, the pools retained their serenity, reflecting what was present without changing it. A gentle breeze rose, brushing across the water. The pools responded, sending small waves across the surfaces, and the Pokémon moved with it, Lumineon darting, Chinchou gliding, the reeds swaying. The wind seemed alive here, playful, in tune with the rhythm of the river that had brought him. Snorlax closed his eyes, breathing slowly. The pools, the river, the wind, they all felt connected, a single story unfolding. The journey wasn't about reaching a destination. It had never been about arriving somewhere specific. It was about seeing, listening, and understanding the life that existed in each moment. Even as evening approached, Snorlax remained by the largest pool. The sun dipped lower, painting the water in fiery hues of orange and red. Shadows lengthened, stretching across the plains and reflecting in the still pools like elongated fingers of light. The Lumineon swam in gentle circles, its glow softening in the fading light. Snorlax thought about the days behind him, the forest, the village, the plains, the stone circles, the fork in the river. Each place had taught him something. Each moment had shaped him. He had moved slowly, but he had moved with intention. He had followed the river, and it had brought him here. As night began to settle, he placed Lyra's lantern by the pool. Its soft glow mingled with the reflections of the stars appearing above. The Lumineon paused to swim near the light, its body catching the glow. And for a moment, the water seemed to hold two sources of radiance, the lantern and the Pokémon's own shimmering form. Snorlax leaned back against the grass, feeling the warmth of the day lingering on his fur. The pools reflected the night sky now, dotted with the first stars. The wind whispered faintly, carrying scents of flowers and the river's current. And for the first time in a long while, he felt a quiet certainty. He didn't need to know what lay ahead. The journey itself, the slow observation, the quiet companionship of water and wind and life, it was enough. The Lumineon swam close one last time, then vanished beneath the surface. Snorlax watched until it disappeared completely, leaving only the mirrored sky behind. He closed his eyes fully, breathing in the cool evening air. The pools, the river, the wind, the plains, they were all alive, all moving in ways he could feel but not fully name, and he was part of it. In that stillness, he understood something new. Life, in its slow, unhurried rhythm, was not about arrival. It was about presence. Snorlax exhaled, a deep and contented sigh, and felt the gentle pull of sleep settling over him. Not the long, endless sleep of his past, but the kind that allowed dreams to wander slowly, like currents moving beneath the surface of water. The lantern glowed softly beside him. The pools shimmered under the night sky, and the river whispered in the distance, always moving, always flowing, always patient. Snorlax, for the first time in days, felt perfectly at peace. As the first light of dawn faded into a warm amber morning, Snorlax rose from the soft grass beside the shimmering pools. The water reflected the pale sunlight, rippling faintly as a gentle breeze danced across the surface. The Lumineon and other Pokémon he had observed the day before were gone, slipping back into the deeper reaches of the pools, leaving only the quiet hum of water and wind. Snorlax stretched, rolling his shoulders and arching his back in a long, deliberate movement. He glanced at the river to the right, following its path as it curved away from the pools and toward a distant line of soft hills. Its current was calmer here, slower, as though carrying the memories of the journey so far. He stepped into the grass, feeling the cool morning dew beneath his paws, and continued walking. The plains stretched outward in gentle waves, dotted with clusters of flowers and occasional small stones. The air was fresh, carrying scents of wet earth and wild blooms. As he moved, Snorlax noticed the light changing subtly. Shadows lengthened, and the sun took on a softer hue. The day was transitioning toward evening, though the warmth still lingered in the air. After hours of slow walking, the plains began to change again. Grass grew taller and more delicate, bending gracefully under the soft wind. Wildflowers painted the hills in soft shades of lavender, pale gold, and muted pink. A faint mist hovered just above the ground, catching the last light of the day and scattering it into tiny sparks that resembled distant stars. Here, the land felt quieter, more still, and yet full of life. Snorlax sensed it immediately. The calm was different from the pools he had left behind. It was deeper, almost sacred, as if the very earth had slowed its rhythm in respect for the twilight. As he walked through the tall grass, small shapes emerged from the shadows. A group of combi flitted along, their tiny wings buzzing in a gentle harmony. A few budu tucked themselves among the flowers, nodding slightly as the wind passed through their petals. Snorlax moved slowly, careful not to disturb them, and they didn't scatter. They seemed to recognize his deliberate pace, the quiet nature of his presence. The light continued to shift, turning the sky into a soft gradient of peach, rose, and violet. The first stars appeared, faint and tentative, blinking into view above the horizon. Snorlax paused to watch them, sitting amid the tall grass. The air was cool now, carrying the scent of flowers, soil, and something faintly metallic, perhaps the distant reflection of the river that still ran beyond the hills. He noticed a gentle glow among the flowers nearby. Tiny patches of light flickered and pulsed in rhythm with the wind, almost like soft lanterns that had grown from the earth itself. Fireflies, he realized, hovering delicately, their glow painting the edges of petals and blades of grass. Snorlax leaned forward slightly, observing the scene. The meadow was alive in a different way than the pools had been. Here, life moved quietly, delicately, synchronized with the slow pulse of twilight. Each creature, each light, each whisper of wind seemed attuned to a rhythm older than time. As the sun dipped lower, the meadow deepened into rich shades of violet and blue. Shadows merged, creating soft contrasts that made the fireflies glow even brighter. Snorlax settled fully onto the grass, feeling the ground's softness beneath him. The flowers swayed gently, brushing against his fur in a way that felt like a quiet greeting. From the shadows, a few more Pokémon emerged. A Togepi rolled carefully across the soft earth, its shell catching the glow of the fireflies. A pair of Hoot-Hoot perched on low branches, their eyes wide and calm, observing him silently. Even a small Flabébé drifted closer, its flower glowing faintly as it hovered. Snorlax smiled faintly, watching each movement. This place demanded patience. It required him to observe, to be present, to allow the slow unfolding of twilight to reveal its wonders. It wasn't about action or movement. It was about quiet presence, about watching the subtle shifts of life as the day surrendered to night. He leaned back on the grass, closing his eyes for a moment. The breeze carried the scent of wildflowers and soft earth, mixing with the faint aroma of the river in the distance. The fireflies flickered softly, the grass whispered in the wind, and the faint calls of distant Pokémon created a lullaby unique to this meadow. Snorlax thought of the pools, the river's fork, and the whispering stones. Each place had taught him something different: to move slowly, to observe, to listen, to understand. And now, in the twilight meadow, he felt the culmination of all those lessons. Here, presence mattered more than destination. Observation mattered more than movement. The fireflies shifted, moving closer to form delicate patterns across the ground. Snorlax tilted his head, marveling at the precision of their light. It reminded him of the small ripples in the shimmering pools, the way water reflected both sky and land in perfect harmony. Nature had its own artistry, and he had the privilege of witnessing it. As the last hints of sunlight faded behind distant hills, the first glow of moonlight touched the meadow. The pale light mingled with the fireflies' glow, creating a tapestry of silver and gold across the flowers and grass. Snorlax remained still, absorbing the beauty of the night's arrival. In the distance, A faint rustle drew his attention. A small herd of deerling emerged, cautious but graceful, moving in synchronized rhythm. They didn't notice him at first, and even when their paths brought them close, they passed without alarm, as if sensing the calm in his presence. Snorlax observed quietly, noticing every detail. The sway of their antlers, the soft steps across the grass, the shimmer of dew on their coats. It was another lesson in patience, in observing life without interfering. Each moment was fleeting, delicate, yet infinite when held in attention. Night deepened, and the meadow settled into complete tranquility. The river beyond whispered faintly, carrying its memories to the horizon. Snorlax watched the stars, listening to the soft chorus of nocturnal life around him. The fireflies, the wind, the gentle calls of distant Pokémon all merged into a symphony of quiet wonder. He felt a deep sense of peace. Here, in this twilight meadow, he understood the slow rhythm of life. Each place he had visited, every step he had taken, had led him here, not to a final destination, but to a place where time slowed, where the world revealed itself gently, and where his presence mattered simply by existing in harmony with all around him. He lay down fully now, resting his head on his paws. The fireflies continued their soft dance, the grass swayed, and the first breaths of night wrapped around him like a gentle blanket. Lyra's lantern, tucked carefully in his pouch, glowed faintly beside him, a reminder of friendship, of guidance, and of the slow warmth of human kindness. Snorlax closed his eyes completely, breathing in the cool air, feeling the soft ground beneath him, listening to the quiet symphony of the meadow. The twilight meadow held him gently, as if acknowledging the long path he had walked and welcoming him to rest. And as sleep began to settle, not deep and dreamless but soft and attentive, Snorlax thought quietly to himself. The world moves slowly, but every moment carries its own light. Every place has a story, and I am here to see it. The stars above shimmered softly, mirrored by the fireflies below. The river whispered faintly in the distance, carrying echoes of the pools and the fork, of the plains and the wind. Snorlax, at peace, drifted into gentle rest, cradled by the meadow, the night, and the quiet promise of tomorrow. The twilight meadow faded behind him as Snorlax continued along the river's gentle curve. Night had fully settled over the plains, and the air was cool and fragrant with the scent of grass and dew. The river glimmered faintly under the moonlight, a silver thread winding through the darkened hills. Its song was soft now, calm, almost coaxing him forward. Snorlax moved steadily, each pawfall measured and deliberate. The fireflies of the meadow followed him for a time, flitting among the grass like tiny stars reluctant to leave his presence. Their soft glow gradually faded as he approached a subtle dip in the land, a small hollow nestled between low hills. Here, the air felt different, softer, quieter. There was a sense of anticipation, as though the earth itself had hushed to prepare for something unseen. The river's current slowed, widening into a gentle pool that reflected the night sky. Snorlax paused at the edge, observing the water's surface, which shimmered with the reflection of countless stars above. He stepped into the hollow slowly, the soft ground cushioning each heavy step. The light from the moon fell through a break in the hills, creating gentle silver patches across the grass. All around, the hollow seemed cradled, protected, a place apart from the rest of the plains. From the shadows, shapes began to emerge. Small Pokémon appeared quietly, moving with care and curiosity. A pair of noctowl perched silently in low branches, watching the river and the hollow below with wide, knowing eyes. Marill paddled in the calm pool, its movements slow and deliberate. Even a lone Murkrow drifted in from the edges, circling above with quiet wings. Snorlax settled by the water's edge, lowering himself carefully onto the soft grass. His reflection mingled with the stars, creating a doubled image of sky and self. He watched the Pokémon around him without moving. They seemed to sense his calm presence and accepted it without fear. The river here was still, enough to carry soft sounds, distant frogs, the occasional rustle of leaves, and the faint, rhythmic chirp of insects. Every sound was clear and purposeful, like a gentle conversation held by the hollow itself. Snorlax breathed slowly, letting the music of this quiet night flow into him. As he watched, a subtle glow appeared among the reeds. It was faint at first, like a soft pulse, then stronger, revealing small duskull moving gently through the water. Their forms reflected moonlight, giving them an ethereal quality. Snorlax observed silently, marveling at their calm, measured movement. The hollow was alive in a slow, delicate rhythm. Everything moved with intention. Even the wind seemed to whisper differently here, softer, quieter, carrying the faint scent of flowers, river, and earth all at once. Snorlax closed his eyes briefly, letting the hollow's energy fill him, letting it remind him that the world could move gently and still hold wonder. Time passed, unnoticed. Snorlax watched as more Pokémon came forth from hidden corners. A Spheal rolled into the pool, its small form making ripples that sparkled like silver threads. A few Shinx appeared at the edges, their fur catching the moonlight, creating tiny sparks as they moved cautiously. Each movement was measured, each interaction delicate, as if the hollow demanded respect and attention. Snorlax leaned back, resting his head on his paws, and allowed his eyes to drift closed for a moment. The moonlight brushed his fur, the soft ripple of water caressed his senses, and the quiet chorus of nocturnal life surrounded him. He felt part of the hollow, not as an intruder, but as another being moving in rhythm with it. Somewhere in the distance, the river continued its gentle journey. Its reflections seemed to capture memories of places Snorlax had visited: the shimmering pools, the plains, the stone circles, the fork, and the twilight meadow. Here, in the starry hollow, everything merged into a single, unbroken rhythm. Opening his eyes again, Snorlax noticed a faint trail of glowing plants along the edge of the pool. Soft, luminescent moss coated the stones and extended into the grass, illuminating the hollow like scattered stars fallen to earth. He approached it slowly, paw after paw, and observed the small Pokémon moving in and around the glowing plants. They seemed aware of the light, moving gently to avoid disturbing its glow. A faint breeze carried whispers across the hollow. They weren't voices, but a sound of meaning, soft and melodic. Snorlax listened. You move slowly. You notice. You are part. The rhythm of the hollow spoke without words, carrying with it the knowledge that patience and presence were themselves forms of understanding. Snorlax settled once more at the water's edge, dipping a paw into the calm surface. The ripples spread slowly, distorting the mirrored sky, and then restoring it to perfect clarity. A small Psyduck floated near, its expression calm, observing him as though recognizing his deliberate presence. He watched the night deepen. The moon climbed higher, and the stars multiplied, twinkling faintly in mirrored patterns across the water. Snorlax felt a sense of quiet gratitude. Every step of his journey had led him to this hollow, to this stillness, to this delicate, living moment where the world itself seemed to breathe alongside him. Fireflies drifted into the hollow, mingling with the glow of luminescent moss and the reflections of stars on the water. They created a soft, layered tapestry of light, each spark purposeful, each movement deliberate. Snorlax observed silently, understanding that beauty existed in attention, in patience, and in the careful observation of the world's quiet rhythms. Hours passed as he remained still. The hollow, the river, the moss, the stars, and the Pokémon all seemed in sync, moving together in slow, graceful harmony. Snorlax felt time stretch and fold around him, as if he were no longer moving through moments but enveloped within them. Eventually, he pulled Lyra's lantern from his pouch and placed it near the water. Its warm glow joined the subtle luminescence of the moss, the fireflies, and the reflected stars. It was small, but in the soft night, it seemed to hold the entire world in miniature. Snorlax leaned back, eyes half closed, feeling the balance of light, movement, and stillness around him. The starry hollow seemed to acknowledge him. The soft ripple of water, the gentle sway of plants, and the quiet movements of nocturnal Pokémon all spoke of welcome, acceptance, and the beauty of patience. Snorlax exhaled slowly, feeling the rhythm of the hollow seep into him. He realized something important. The journey was not about where he went, but how he went. Every slow step, every pause, every careful observation had brought him closer to understanding, not understanding in words, but understanding in presence. A small group of Duskull drifted closer, circling the pool gently. Their forms shimmered in the moonlight, creating tiny shadows that danced across the grass. Snorlax observed without moving, letting them guide the rhythm of his breathing. Eventually, the last hints of the evening breeze faded, leaving only the soft hum of nocturnal life. The hollow settled into a profound stillness, alive yet calm, welcoming yet private. Snorlax lay fully on the grass, the coolness beneath him, the lantern's warm glow, the reflective water, and the first sense of dreamlike comfort wrapping around him. He whispered quietly, as if to the hollow itself, "Thank you for waiting, for letting me see." The water rippled gently in reply. The wind whispered faintly through the moss, and the fireflies flickered softly, acknowledging him in the only way a quiet, living world could. And as sleep finally descended, not heavy, not endless, but soft, aware, and attentive, Snorlax felt the deep, unspoken truth of the Starry Hollow, that patience, presence, and the gentle rhythm of life were the true path to understanding. The river murmured faintly beyond the pool, carrying reflections of light and time. The moon and stars mirrored perfectly across the still water. The Pokémon rested, moved, and observed gently, each living in harmony with the hollow. And Snorlax, finally at rest, let the night cradle him, feeling the pulse of the Starry Hollow resonate within his chest, a quiet promise of guidance, of peace, and of the slow, endless journey that still lay ahead. The first hints of dawn brushed the horizon with pale light as Snorlax stirred beside the quiet pool of the Starry Hollow. The lantern's soft glow flickered faintly against the grass, mirroring the last traces of moonlight that lingered in the air. The river murmured softly in the distance, its voice subdued, carrying memories of the pools, the meadow, and the gentle rhythm of night. Snorlax rose slowly, stretching his massive body. Each movement was deliberate, a gentle acknowledgement of the long night behind him and the path that lay ahead. The Starry Hollow, with its luminescent moss, fireflies, and reflective water, had given him a sense of peace, unlike anything before. Yet the river continued to call, urging him forward. He followed its winding path, moving slowly through the soft grass, feeling each step beneath his paws. The air was cool, carrying scents of wet earth and faint floral notes. The gentle hum of nocturnal life faded as he approached the edge of the hollow, replaced by a different kind of stillness. Beyond the hills ahead lay a dense forest, its trees tall and silent, their shadows merging into one another in the morning light. The entrance to the silent grove was unassuming, yet as Snorlax stepped beneath the canopy, he felt the air change. The temperature dipped slightly, the scent of moss and old wood filling his senses. A soft, muted quiet enveloped him, as though the forest itself held its breath. Here, sound was different. Even the river's distant murmur was softened, filtered through the thick foliage. Footsteps were absorbed by the forest floor, muffled by layers of fallen leaves and moss. Every small rustle of a leaf or distant bird call seemed amplified by contrast, precise and intimate. Snorlax walked slowly, each paw step measured. He noticed small shapes moving in the shadows, a shroomish tucked beneath a low branch, its cap catching the faint light, and a murkrow perched silently on a high bough, its eyes glimmering in the faint, dim light. Neither reacted to his presence, and he moved carefully, respecting the delicate balance of life in the grove. The silent grove felt ancient. The trees were immense, their trunks thick and rough, wrapped in moss and lichen. Some branches arched high overhead, forming natural corridors that filtered the light into soft, greenish hues. Small plants with subtle luminescence dotted the forest floor, creating gentle points of light that guided his path. Snorlax paused beside a small clearing where the light fell more directly, revealing a smooth stone partially covered with moss. He lowered himself to observe it, placing a paw gently on its surface. The stone was cool and solid, a quiet anchor in the otherwise ethereal forest. It reminded him of the whispering stones back on the plains, though here, the silence was more profound, more intimate. From deeper in the grove, a faint rustle drew his attention. Slowly, a group of hoot-hoot emerged, landing softly on nearby branches. They observed him silently, blinking in unison, as if assessing his presence. Snorlax returned their gaze with slow, deliberate blinks. There was no need for words here. Presence alone communicated understanding. Time seemed to stretch in the silent grove. Snorlax walked from clearing to clearing, each step slow, each pause meaningful. The forest held its own rhythm, one that required patience to notice. The gentle sway of branches, the quiet drip of dew from leaves, the faint movement of small Pokémon hidden among roots and ferns. He noticed a small water source, a shallow spring nestled between tree roots, its surface perfectly still. A Politoad waited gently at the edge, its movements deliberate and careful. Snorlax lowered himself to the ground, observing its rhythm. Even as he moved, he maintained the forest's quiet tempo, allowing the small Pokémon to continue without fear or disturbance. The deeper he went, the more the forest revealed. Strange, luminous fungi glowed, faintly on tree trunks, illuminating small pathways and revealing hidden corners. Leaf shadows shifted slowly, creating patterns that danced across the mossy floor. A gentle breeze stirred occasionally, carrying the smell of damp earth and the faint hint of distant flowers. Snorlax felt an unfamiliar sensation, a deep, meditative awareness of the forest's life. Each tree, each plant, each small creature contributed to the grove's rhythm. The air itself seemed alive, pulsing softly with a slow, deliberate heartbeat. In this silence, he realized how much he had learned from moving slowly, observing patiently, and listening deeply. Hours passed as he wandered through the silent grove. He encountered a gentle stream, its water reflecting the muted green light above. Small Lotad paddled across its surface, while a lone Poliwag rested near the edge. Snorlax crouched beside the stream, dipping a paw carefully into the cool water. The ripples spread slowly, reflecting tree shadows and faint glimmers of light, before settling back into perfect stillness. He walked further into the forest, noticing subtle changes in the terrain. Fallen logs created natural bridges, while moss-covered stones served as small steps over shallow hollows. Small Pokémon moved in and out of sight, a cautious zigzagoon among roots, a quiet Seedot hiding beneath a leaf, and a Dunsparce slithering along the ground. All observed him with curiosity, but never fear, recognizing his slow, deliberate pace. The forest deepened, and the light dimmed. Yet, in the dimness, life glimmered in small ways. Luminescent mushrooms, reflective water surfaces, and faintly glowing insects hovering in the air. The silent grove seemed designed for observation, for noticing subtle beauty, for moving slowly and truly seeing. Snorlax reached a larger clearing where the trees arched high, forming a cathedral-like canopy overhead. Moonlight filtered through, touching the forest floor in delicate beams. The soft sound of a distant waterfall reached his ears, mingling with the quiet hum of nocturnal insects. He paused here, sitting on a bed of moss and feeling the forest's quiet embrace. In this space, he felt the full weight and gift of stillness. The silent grove demanded respect, attention, and gentle observation. Every sound, every movement, every breath mattered. The Pokémon here thrived in patience, and he had learned to match their rhythm. A faint glow emerged from the far edge of the clearing. Snorlax observed, careful not to move too quickly. Slowly, a small group of Chinchou approached, their tiny antennae glowing softly. They moved delicately across the moss, their light reflecting in miniature patterns on the forest floor. Snorlax remained still, letting them pass without interruption, feeling the quiet communion between himself and the forest's inhabitants. Night deepened further. The air grew cooler, carrying the scent of moss, water, and the faint aroma of unseen flowers. The forest settled into complete quiet, every movement measured, every sound deliberate. Snorlax lay down on the soft moss, feeling the forest floor beneath him, the canopy above, and the slow pulse of life surrounding him. He thought of the starry hollow, the twilight meadow, the pools, and the river's fork. Each place had offered him lessons, patience, observation, and the gentle rhythm of life. The silent grove was another step in understanding, not through movement or words, but through quiet presence. He exhaled deeply, closing his eyes. The rustle of leaves, the soft trickle of water, and the occasional flutter of wings formed a lullaby unique to this grove. Snorlax felt the forest cradle him, acknowledging his journey and welcoming him to rest. He whispered softly, as if speaking to the grove itself, "Thank you for showing me the quiet way of life." The forest responded in its own gentle manner. A leaf fell slowly. The stream rippled faintly, and a small moth hovered near the moonlit clearing before drifting away. The silent grove's rhythm continued, soft, deliberate, and perfectly in tune with his own. As sleep overtook him, Snorlax felt a profound sense of peace. The lessons of the journey, the pools, the meadow, the hollow, and now the grove, merged into a single understanding. That life, when observed with patience and presence, revealed its true depth and beauty. The forest hummed quietly around him, the river whispered faintly beyond the trees, and the moonlight illuminated the silent grove in soft, serene patterns. Snorlax, at rest, became part of this gentle rhythm, a slow, steady heartbeat in the ongoing life of the world. And as the night deepened, the silent grove held him safely, cradling his slow, patient journey in its quiet, enduring embrace. The silent grove gradually thinned as Snorlax followed the river's gentle bend. The trees gave way to open land, and a soft silver light spilled across the grass, bathing the world in the quiet glow of moonlight. The air smelled of damp earth, flowers, and the faint trace of the river that had guided him through so many landscapes. Snorlax moved slowly, each pawfall deliberate, feeling the soft soil beneath him. The forest behind him had taught patience and quiet observation, and he carried that rhythm into this new space. The river, wider now and calmer, shimmered alongside him, reflecting the full moon above in a gentle silvery mirror. Ahead, the land opened into a clearing unlike any he had seen before. The grass was soft and thick, the edges lined with small clusters of glowing flowers that pulsed faintly with light. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long, pale shadows across the ground. Every surface seemed to capture its glow, making the clearing appear both vast and intimate, as if time itself had slowed to let the night's beauty unfold. Snorlax paused at the edge of the clearing. The air was alive with quiet motion, the faint hum of insects, the soft rustle of grass, and the occasional splash of water from the river. Yet everything moved with deliberation, as if aware that the clearing itself was a sanctuary. From the shadows, shapes began to appear. Small Pokémon emerged carefully, their movements measured and calm. A few Zubat flew in low, their wings catching the moonlight, while a pair of Hoot-Hoot perched on low branches, their eyes wide and steady. Even a shy Murkrow appeared from the distant trees, circling slowly before resting on a moss-covered log. Snorlax stepped forward into the clearing, moving with care. His presence did not disturb the harmony. Instead, it seemed to integrate with it, as though his slow, deliberate pace belonged here. He lowered himself gently onto the grass, observing the silver glow around him. The river's reflections stretched across the clearing, creating multiple mirrors of moonlight. Each ripple distorted the reflection slightly, sending tiny patterns of silver dancing across the grass and flowers. Snorlax dipped a paw into the water, sending gentle ripples spreading outward. The Pokémon nearby moved in sync with the rhythm, their reactions subtle and respectful. A faint glow from a patch of flowers caught his eye. A group of shiny Chingling emerged, their bells faintly chiming in the quiet night, adding a soft melody to the clearing's natural rhythm. Snorlax listened, allowing their gentle sound to blend with the moonlight, the river, and the soft movements of the surrounding creatures. He leaned back on the grass, letting the cool earth support his weight. The moonlight bathed him in pale silver, and the clearing seemed to stretch endlessly. A quiet world, untouched by the urgency of the day. The river's soft murmur accompanied the faint rustle of wings and the delicate hum of insects. Snorlax closed his eyes briefly, absorbing the totality of this moment. The moon's reflection in the river shifted as clouds drifted lazily across the sky. The light softened, casting the clearing in deep shades of silver and blue. Small Pokémon moved with care, some foraging, others observing, all maintaining the clearing's delicate balance. Snorlax watched quietly, noting every movement, every ripple, every subtle flicker of light. Hours passed, though it was impossible to tell. Snorlax remained still for long stretches, letting the rhythm of the clearing settle within him. The moon climbed higher, illuminating the tips of the flowers and the tops of the grass, while the shadows beneath the trees grew deeper and more mysterious. He noticed a lone lunatone resting on a flat stone near the river's edge, its crescent shape glowing softly in harmony with the moon. The presence of the Pokémon added to the clearing's gentle energy, a reminder that even in stillness, life thrived in quiet forms. Snorlax leaned forward slightly, observing the small creatures as they moved. A few Chinchou drifted near the river, their bioluminescent antennae reflecting in the moonlit water. The interplay of light and shadow, of movement and stillness, created patterns that seemed almost deliberate, like a carefully composed painting. The clearing felt like a place out of time. Every breath, every movement, every flicker of light was amplified by the silence. Snorlax realized that this was a culmination of all his journey's lessons. The pools, the twilight meadow, the starry hollow, and the silent grove had prepared him to fully experience the moonlit clearing. Here, patience, observation, and presence were not just virtues, they were a way of being. The night deepened further, and the air grew cooler. Snorlax shifted slightly, lying fully on the grass, his massive body stretching comfortably beneath the pale glow of the moon. The soft sounds of the clearing, river, wind, insects, and the subtle movements of Pokémon created a lullaby that filled the night. He thought quietly of all the places he had traveled. The forests, the plains, the forks of the river, the pools, and meadows. Each place had offered him something unique. Each had demanded a slow, attentive presence. And now, in this moonlit clearing, all those experiences converged, revealing a subtle truth. Life was not a destination, but a rhythm, a flow, and one must move gently to fully appreciate it. Fireflies drifted into the clearing, mingling with the glow of the flowers and the reflections of the moon. Their soft light painted the tips of grass and petals, creating a dynamic, living tapestry of silver and green. Snorlax watched without moving, appreciating the delicate balance between the creatures, the light, and the earth. The gentle rhythm of the clearing seemed to synchronize with his breathing. Inhale, exhale, subtle movements of life all around, each moment acknowledged and appreciated. Snorlax closed his eyes fully, letting himself absorb the totality of the moonlit clearing, allowing its quiet beauty to fill him entirely. A faint rustle from the distant trees drew his attention. A pair of Noctowl glided silently above, their wings catching the moonlight in soft arcs. They landed on low branches, observing the clearing with calm, unhurried precision. Snorlax observed them in turn, feeling the connection of shared presence, the unspoken harmony of beings coexisting quietly. The river's soft murmur continued, carrying reflections of moonlight across the grass. The small ripple of water, the flicker of fireflies, the gentle sway of flowers, and the movements of nocturnal Pokémon all combined into a subtle symphony. Snorlax felt himself fully part of it, a slow heartbeat in a world that thrived in stillness. Night stretched on, the moon reaching its zenith. Snorlax lay on the grass, heavy and relaxed, feeling the soft ground beneath him, the gentle glow of the moon above, and the rhythmic presence of the river and forest around him. Each breath connected him to the land. Each pulse tied him to the creatures sharing the clearing. He whispered softly, as if speaking to the moon itself. "Thank you for showing me the quiet beauty of the night." The fireflies flickered in reply, and the river shimmered faintly in acknowledgement. Snorlax closed his eyes fully, allowing the moonlight, the river, the Pokémon, and the gentle sounds of night to cradle him. And as sleep embraced him, not heavy but soft and aware, he felt the moonlit clearing become a part of him. The rhythms of life, the lessons of patience, presence, and observation, all settled within his heart. The journey continued, but for now, the world was perfect, gentle, and infinitely luminous. The first silver traces of dawn softened the moonlit clearing as Snorlax stirred, feeling the gentle embrace of the night slowly giving way to the early light. The lantern he carried flickered faintly, casting a warm glow against the pale moonlight that lingered on the grass. The air was cool and fragrant, carrying the subtle scent of damp earth, flowers, and the river that had guided him through so many landscapes. Snorlax rose slowly, stretching his massive body, muscles rolling beneath his fur. Each motion was deliberate, a gentle acknowledgement of the long night and the path that lay ahead. The moonlit clearing had offered him lessons in patience, observation, and quiet presence. Yet the river's soft murmur urged him onward, inviting him to discover what lay beyond the familiar glow. He moved forward, stepping carefully through the grass, each pawfall soft against the earth, the silver light of the fading moon reflected in the river beside him, casting glimmers across his path. As he walked, the terrain shifted subtly. The clearing widened into a gentle slope, dotted with clusters of wildflowers, and the air grew warmer, with the first hints of morning. A faint glimmer in the distance caught his attention. It was subtle at first, almost hidden behind a thin veil of mist. Snorlax approached slowly, each step measured and quiet. As he drew closer, the light revealed a narrow passage framed by low stone formations and dense foliage. Beyond it, a hidden glade unfolded, a secluded world bathed in soft, diffuse light, partially illuminated by early sunbeams filtering through delicate leaves. The hidden glade felt untouched, suspended between night and day. The grass was lush, deep green, and dotted with small patches of flowers that glowed faintly, their luminescence gentle enough to complement the sunlight. The air was filled with soft fragrances, blossoms, fresh moss, and the subtle aroma of the nearby river. Every sound, even the faintest, carried with soft clarity, the flutter of wings, the rustle of leaves, the delicate hum of insects. Snorlax entered the glade with deliberate care. His presence did not disturb the harmony. Instead, it seemed to integrate naturally into the quiet rhythm of the space. Small Pokémon emerged from the undergrowth, a cautious Marill rolling along the soft earth, a curious Voodoo peeking from among the flowers, and a solitary Lotad drifting gently on a narrow stream that wound through the glade. The stream's surface reflected the soft light of the morning sun, shimmering gently as it meandered past roots and moss-covered stones. Snorlax lowered himself to observe, dipping a paw into the cool water. Ripples spread outward, distorting the reflection for a moment, before it returned to perfect clarity. The Pokémon nearby moved around him with care, their subtle movements blending seamlessly into the glade's rhythm. A faint rustle drew his attention. From the far edge of the glade, a small group of Flabibae floated forward, each carrying a tiny flower that glowed faintly in harmony with the ambient light. They hovered with gentle curiosity, circling near the blossoms already growing in the glade. Snorlax observed silently, appreciating the delicate balance between flora and Pokémon, light and shadow. The glade itself seemed alive in a way he had not fully experienced before. The interplay of light, foliage, and movement created a sense of harmony, as though every element existed in quiet synchronization. The river, the trees, the flowers, and the creatures were all part of a single subtle rhythm that required patience and observation to perceive. Snorlax explored slowly, moving from one patch of glowing flora to another. Each step was mindful, each pause intentional. Moss-covered stones served as gentle stepping points, while clusters of flowers swayed lightly in the breeze, brushing softly against his fur. A small dunspar slithered along the edge of the stream, curious yet cautious, observing him without fear. Hours passed unnoticed. The glade's light shifted gently as the sun climbed higher, soft beams filtering through the trees and illuminating tiny dew droplets on leaves. The gentle hum of life persisted, insects moving delicately, water flowing softly, and Pokémon continuing their quiet routines. Snorlax watched attentively, absorbing each subtle detail, each measured movement, each whisper of life. He came upon a small hollow beneath a large tree where moss grew thick and soft. A few shroomish peeked from beneath the roots, their caps catching the light in muted glimmers. Snorlax crouched carefully, allowing them to move freely without disturbance. In this place, every creature, every plant, and every ripple of water seemed to matter, as if the hidden glade existed to teach him the value of slow, deliberate observation. A gentle breeze stirred, carrying faint floral scents and the earthy aroma of the river. The Pokémon responded subtly. Leaves shifted, flowers trembled, and small insects adjusted their flight paths. Snorlax breathed deeply, letting the glade's calm energy fill him. The lesson was clear. Patience, presence, and careful attention revealed the depth and beauty of life in a way that speed could never achieve. The stream widened slightly, forming a small pool that mirrored the sky above. Snorlax approached and settled beside it, dipping a paw lightly into the still water. Ripples radiated outward, reflecting sunlight, shadows, and the gentle glow of flora surrounding him. A lone chinchou floated nearby, its bioluminescent antennae adding subtle shifting light to the scene. Snorlax watched quietly, appreciating the quiet interplay of natural rhythms around him. Time continued its unhurried flow. Pokémon moved through the glade with gentle grace. A pair of hoot-hoot perched on a low branch, a small marill paddled in the pool, and a shy Flabébé hovered near flowers. Even as Snorlax remained still, the prophet, the world moved in harmony with his presence, each moment unfolding without haste. He observed how light and shadow shifted as the morning progressed, how the stream's reflections changed with the subtle movements of water and flora, and how the Pokémon adapted to the soft rhythm of the glade. Every element was alive yet calm, moving yet perfectly still in its own way. Snorlax felt a profound sense of connection. The hidden glade was a microcosm of everything he had experienced. The shimmering pools, the twilight meadow, the starry hollow, the silent grove, and the moonlit clearing. Each had taught him lessons in patience, observation, and the gentle rhythm of life, culminating in this secluded haven. As the sun rose higher, the glade brightened, revealing more subtle details. Tiny insects crawling over dew-laden leaves, moss-covered stones glinting faintly, and the faint luminescence of flowers glowing softly even in daylight. Snorlax moved slowly among them, touching the plants gently with his paws, observing without disturbance. Eventually, he settled beside the stream, leaning back against a mossy stone. The hidden glade embraced him, with its soft light, the gentle flow of water, and the quiet movements of Poké-Monday. He closed his eyes, breathing deeply, letting the combined rhythms of water, light, and life fill him completely. He reflected quietly on the journey that had brought him here. Each step, each pause, each quiet observation had led him to understand a fundamental truth, that life's beauty was best appreciated in slow, deliberate moments, in careful attention, and in patient presence. The glade hummed softly with life. Snorlax felt it resonate within him, the steady, calming pulse of existence aligning with his own slow heartbeat. Every ripple, every flicker of light, every subtle movement of flora and fauna contributed to a harmony that was both external and internal. A soft breeze carried the faintest whisper of the river beyond the glade. Snorlax listened carefully, appreciating the way it intertwined with the gentle hum of life here. Even as time passed, the hidden glade remained constant, a sanctuary of quiet beauty where presence alone mattered. He whispered softly, acknowledging the glade. "Thank you for showing me the wonder of stillness." The Pokémon nearby responded subtly. Chinchou's lights pulsed gently. The Flabébé hovered closer to the flowers, and the Marill blinked slowly, all movements harmonizing with the quiet rhythm of the space. Snorlax felt a profound sense of peace, knowing that the lessons of the journey, the pools, the meadows, the hollows, the groves, and the moonlit clearing had all led him here. As the day unfolded, Snorlax lay fully on the soft moss, his massive body sinking slightly into the earth, feeling both grounded and embraced. The gentle flow of the stream, the soft sway of flowers, the dappled sunlight filtering through leaves, and the quiet presence of Pokémon formed a lullaby that filled the hidden glade. He drifted into a calm, aware sleep, not heavy, but gentle, attentive to the rhythms of life surrounding him. The glade cradled him, allowing him to rest while remaining a participant in the ongoing, delicate symphony of nature. The hidden glade, with its luminous flora, flowing water, and quiet inhabitants, became a part of him, embedding its slow, patient rhythm deep within his heart. Snorlax understood that life's journey was not measured in distance or speed, but in the depth of presence, observation, and connection to the world around him. And so, enveloped by the glade's soft light, gentle sounds, and calm energy, Snorlax rested fully, a slow, steady heartbeat within the serene sanctuary, ready to continue the journey when the time came. The hidden glade gradually receded behind him as Snorlax rose, feeling the gentle embrace of the morning light. The soft luminescence of flowers and moss lingered faintly, a subtle reminder of the serene haven he had rested in. The air was cool and fragrant, carrying traces of the glade's earthy scent mixed with the faint aroma of distant blooms. Snorlax moved slowly, each step deliberate, sinking slightly into the soft moss and grass beneath his massive paws. The river beside him shimmered faintly in the morning light, a mirror of silver and gold reflecting the delicate dance of leaves above. Its song, soft and consistent, guided him gently forward, encouraging patient exploration without haste or urgency. After some time, the terrain shifted subtly, giving way to a narrow, winding path that sloped gently downward. The sound of running water grew stronger, carrying a soft musical cadence that seemed almost intentional in its clarity. Snorlax followed the sound, drawn toward a small brook that whispered through the forest with a gentle, ceaseless murmur. The whispering brook was unlike any watercourse he had encountered. Its surface shimmered with reflections of the morning sun filtering through the trees, yet there was a quiet resonance to its movement, a delicate murmur that seemed to communicate stories from distant streams and hidden pools. Each ripple carried a subtle melody, echoing the lessons of his journey so far: patience, presence, and the beauty of stillness. Snorlax approached the brook carefully, stepping onto the soft earth beside it. The water's edge was lined with moss-covered stones and delicate flowering plants, their colors muted yet vibrant in the soft light. Tiny insects hovered above the surface, their reflections creating patterns that danced on the water. He lowered himself to the ground, leaning close to the brook, and observed the flow. Small ripples spread outward as he dipped a paw into the clear water, creating gentle waves that traveled downstream. Nearby, a pair of Lotad paddled lazily, their lily pads floating effortlessly on the surface. A Chinchou hovered near the bank, its bioluminescent antennae pulsing faintly in harmony with the sunlight and the brook's subtle song. The forest around the brook was alive in its quiet way. Trees arched overhead, their branches forming a natural canopy that filtered the sunlight into soft, dappled patterns. Moss and lichen covered the trunks and stones, adding texture and muted color to the serene scene. The air smelled of damp earth, fresh leaves, and the faint hint of flowers hidden in the shadows. Snorlax moved slowly along the brook, paw by paw, observing the small creatures that inhabited its banks. A shy Marill emerged from a patch of reeds, cautiously paddling along the water's edge. A few Zigzagoons scurried through the undergrowth, stopping occasionally to sniff at moss-covered stones. Even a lone Polytoad croaked softly from a shaded pool, its voice blending with the brook's whispering melody. Time seemed to stretch in the presence of the brook. Snorlax observed each subtle movement, each ripple in the water, and each flicker of light with meticulous attention. He realized that the small details, the way a leaf drifted, the shimmer of water, the glint of a Pokémon's eye, carried a depth often overlooked by hurried travelers. Here, in this secluded path along the whispering brook, everything mattered. The brook curved gently through the forest, creating small pools and eddies where the water's movement slowed. Snorlax paused at one such pool, lowering his massive body beside it. The surface was mirror-like, reflecting the canopy above, the subtle shifts of sunlight, and the occasional movement of a passing Pokémonday. He dipped a paw lightly into the pool, sending ripples outward that distorted the reflection for a brief moment before returning it to calm perfection. From deeper in the forest came faint rustling sounds. Slowly, a group of Shroomish emerged, their caps catching the soft sunlight filtering through the trees. They moved carefully, hopping over stones and roots without disturbing the delicate balance of the brook's edge. Snorlax observed quietly, allowing their gentle rhythm to guide his own breathing and presence. The whisper of the brook seemed to carry more than just sound. It conveyed a sense of continuity, of connection between all living things along its banks. Each ripple, each splash, each gentle wave was part of a larger symphony, and Snorlax felt himself integrated into this quiet rhythm. He moved deliberately, observing without interfering, allowing himself to become part of the flowing melody. Small patches of luminous flora dotted the edges of the brook, glowing softly in subtle shades of green and blue. Fireflies flitted among them, their tiny lights flickering in time with the brook's murmurs. Snorlax leaned back, settling comfortably onto the mossy bank, and watched the interplay of light, water, and life unfold around him. Hours passed in gentle progression. The sunlight shifted, painting the brook and its surroundings with subtle gradients of color. The Pokémon moved gracefully along the banks, their interactions quiet and respectful, each aware of the other's presence. Snorlax remained a calm observer, learning from their careful, deliberate ways. At one point, a gentle breeze stirred the brook's surface, creating faint ripples that carried sunlight reflections downstream. A group of Chinchou drifted toward him, their lights pulsing softly in rhythm with the water's movement. The brook's whispering seemed to respond, the gentle murmur aligning with the subtle flicker of their bioluminescent glow. Snorlax watched, captivated by the delicate harmony between light, sound, and life. Every element seemed synchronized, a natural dance of patience and attention. He realized that the lessons of his journey, the pools, the twilight meadow, the starry hollow, the silent grove, the moonlit clearing, and the hidden glade, culminated here along the whispering brook. It was a living testament to the power of slow observation, quiet presence, and respect for the rhythms of the natural world. He walked along the brook for some time, pausing frequently to observe small details. A marill dipping its paw into the water, a leaf floating gently downstream, the soft shimmer of sunlight on moss-covered rocks. Each observation deepened his sense of connection, grounding him in the present moment and reinforcing the lessons he had gathered from the world around him. Eventually, the brook widened into a small, serene pool, bordered by stones and clusters of flowers. Snorlax settled beside it, leaning back against a mossy rock. The water reflected the sky above, mirroring both the subtle hues of morning and the delicate shimmer of the surrounding flora. Pokémon moved quietly around him. A Budu brushed gently against a flower. A Lotad floated lazily, and a pair of Zigzagoon explored the edges with soft, deliberate steps. Snorlax closed his eyes, listening to the brook's gentle whisper. It was more than sound. It was a rhythm, a story, a guide. He felt the water's energy mingle with his own, a slow, steady pulse that connected him to the stream, the forest, and the creatures sharing the space. Each ripple carried a subtle message. Patience, observation, and gentle presence were the paths to understanding the world in its entirety. He whispered quietly to the brook, as if speaking to an old friend. "Thank you for guiding me, for showing me the gentle way." The water's soft murmur seemed to respond, blending with the gentle movements of the Pokémon and the breeze through the trees. Snorlax felt an overwhelming sense of calm, a deep appreciation for the rhythm and quiet wisdom of the Whispering Brook. As the sun climbed higher, its light streaming through the canopy, the brook shimmered with a mosaic of reflections. Snorlax lay fully on the mossy bank, breathing slowly, letting the soft sounds of water, wind, and life around him envelop his consciousness. The brook cradled him in its gentle flow, connecting the lessons of the past places he had visited into a harmonious understanding of presence, patience, and awareness. Hours melted into a seamless, unhurried flow. The Pokémon of the brook continued their delicate routines. Water rippled gently over stones, and sunlight danced across leaves and moss. Snorlax, fully immersed in the experience, felt himself part of the living rhythm of this secluded sanctuary. Finally, as the day advanced, he drifted into a calm, attentive sleep, fully integrated into the gentle pulse of the Whispering Brook. It had become more than a place. It was a teacher, a guide, and a sanctuary, embodying all the quiet lessons of his long journey. And so, nestled beside the soft murmuring water, surrounded by life moving deliberately and harmoniously, Snorlax rested. The Whispering Brook continued its ceaseless flow, carrying stories, light, and rhythm through the forest, while he dreamed softly, cradled in the quiet wisdom of the world around him. The Whispering Brook slowly faded behind him as Snorlax continued along the forest path, each step measured, deliberate, and calm. The lessons of the hidden glade and the brook lingered in his mind. The patience of observation, the rhythm of life, the subtle beauty in every detail. The air was cool and fragrant, carrying faint hints of river water, moss, and distant blooms, reminding him of the long journey he had undertaken. The forest thinned gradually, giving way to open land. Rolling hills stretched ahead, their slopes dotted with patches of grass and clusters of wildflowers. The soft sunlight filtered through the leaves of scattered trees, casting gentle patterns of light and shadow across the landscape. Every step he took was absorbed by the soft earth, muffling his heavy paws and allowing him to move without disturbing the tranquil harmony around him. Snorlax paused atop a gentle rise, looking out over the valley below. In the distance, he noticed a secluded grove encircled by low hills, a serene space bathed in warm golden light. A small river meandered through the grove, reflecting sunlight like scattered diamonds, while the surrounding grass swayed gently in a soft breeze. It was a perfect place, a place that seemed to exist solely to welcome him. He descended carefully toward the grove, each step mindful and deliberate. As he entered the clearing, the air seemed to soften further, as though the land itself acknowledged his presence and offered its quiet embrace. The river here was calm, wide, and shallow, its waters reflecting the sky and the gentle dance of sunlight through the trees. Pokémon moved slowly and deliberately within the grove. A Marill splashed softly in the river, a pair of Hoot-Hoot perched on low branches, and a Boudou brushed gently against flowers along the bank. Snorlax explored slowly, moving from one patch of grass to another, noting the subtle movements of the Pokémon and the delicate interplay of light and shadow. Every one detail, the shimmer of water, the sway of grass, the soft flutter of wings, felt amplified in this serene space. It was as if the grove had been waiting for him all along, a culmination of every lesson learned throughout his journey. He came upon a smooth stone near the river's edge, partially covered in soft moss. Snorlax lowered himself onto it, leaning back slightly, allowing the comfort of the moss and the warmth of sunlight to envelop him. The Pokémon nearby observed him silently, moving in harmony with his presence. The gentle rhythm of life in the grove mirrored the calm pulse of his own breathing. And for the first time in his journey, Snorlax felt fully integrated with the world around him. The grove seemed alive in subtle, deliberate ways. Small ripples traveled across the river, reflecting light onto nearby plants. Leaves shifted softly in the breeze, carrying faint fragrances of flowers and damp earth. Tiny insects hovered and crawled along stones and stems, their movements delicate and precise. Snorlax observed them with quiet attention, realizing that every element of the grove, no matter how small, contributed to its profound serenity. Hours passed, with the sun climbing slowly in the sky. Snorlax shifted occasionally, adjusting his position to rest comfortably while remaining attentive to the rhythm of the grove. The river's soft murmur, the occasional flutter of wings, and the subtle movement of grass and flowers created a lullaby that filled the clearing. Snorlax felt deeply connected to this space, each heartbeat aligning with the gentle pulse of life around him. From deeper within the grove, a faint path led to a secluded section of the riverbank. Snorlax followed it slowly, arriving at a small pool shaded by trees. The water was perfectly still, reflecting the sky, the surrounding foliage, and the occasional flicker of light from small, glowing plants along the bank. A polytoad croaked softly nearby, its voice blending with the subtle hum of the river. Snorlax lowered himself gently beside the pool, dipping a paw into the cool, clear water. Ripples spread outward, distorting reflections before returning to still perfection. He closed his eyes, absorbing the totality of this final resting place. Memories of the pools, the twilight meadow, the starry hollow, the silent grove, the moonlit clearing, the hidden glade, and the whispering brook flowed through him. Each location had offered a lesson in patience, observation, and the gentle rhythm of life. Here, in this perfect grove, all those lessons converged, forming a profound sense of understanding and peace. The Pokémon of the grove moved around him with quiet respect. A Budu brushed gently against a patch of flowers, a Marill paddled lazily, and a pair of Hoot blinked slowly from their perch. Even the smallest details, the shimmer of water, the subtle glow of plants, the rustle of leaves, felt significant, each one contributing to the delicate harmony of the grove. Snorlax shifted onto the soft grass, lying fully on his back, feeling the warmth of the sun on his fur and the gentle support of the earth beneath him. The river's whispers, the soft hum of insects, and the movements of nearby Pokémon created a lullaby that lulled him into complete relaxation. Every breath, every heartbeat, every subtle movement aligned perfectly with the grove's rhythm. He reflected quietly on the journey that had led him here. Each step, each pause, each observation along the way had prepared him for this moment. The lessons were clear. Life's beauty revealed itself in patient observation, in quiet presence, and in the gentle attention to the world around him. The journey itself was as important as the destination, and the grove symbolized both, providing a sanctuary where all the lessons of the path could be fully realized. The gentle sway of grass, the soft shimmer of water, and the subtle light filtering through leaves became a comforting lullaby. Fireflies drifted slowly into the clearing, their tiny lights flickering in harmony with the pool's reflection. The rhythm of the grove resonated within Snorlax, each heartbeat and breath in sync with the living world around him. He whispered softly, acknowledging the sanctuary around him. "Thank you for this place, for this moment, for the journey itself." The Pokémon nearby seemed to respond in their own quiet ways. Marill shifted gently, causing tiny ripples in the pool. Budu swayed in the sunlight, and the Hoot blinked slowly, their presence amplifying the grove's calm harmony. Snorlax felt the grove embrace him, welcoming him into its rhythm, and he knew, without question, that this was where he was meant to pause. The river beyond the grove continued its gentle journey, murmuring softly over stones and roots. Its song blended with the subtle rustle of leaves, the faint hum of insects, and the occasional flutter of wings. Snorlax closed his eyes fully, allowing the combined sounds to fill him completely. The grove, the river, and the surrounding life cradled him in a perfect balance of motion and stillness, each contributing to a profound sense of peace. Hours passed unnoticed, though the sun moved steadily across the sky. Snorlax remained on the grass, shifting occasionally for comfort, yet fully immersed in the serenity of the grove. Every detail, the light, the water, the movement of Pokémon, and the subtle changes in air and scent, was absorbed with quiet attention. The grove had become a living teacher, demonstrating the profound connection between presence and understanding. As evening approached, the sunlight softened, casting golden hues across the grass and water. Shadows lengthened, and the air cooled, carrying the faint scent of earth and blossoms. Snorlax shifted slightly, settling more deeply into the soft moss and grass, feeling the grove's gentle embrace. The Pokémon moved quietly in response to the changing light, maintaining the grove's harmony without disturbance. Night fell slowly, and the grove transformed under the silver glow of the moon. Stars reflected in the river's surface, mingling with the soft glow of luminescent plants along the bank. The gentle hum of nocturnal life began to rise. A polytoad croaked softly, insects flitted through the air, and the river whispered a quiet song. Snorlax lay fully at ease, feeling completely integrated into this perfect balance of light, sound, and life. He whispered quietly, a final acknowledgement of the journey and its lessons. "Thank you for the path, the world, and the quiet wisdom, for every step that led me here." The grove seemed to respond, alive with a gentle pulse. Ripples shimmered across the river, fireflies flickered softly, and the Pokémon moved with delicate precision. Snorlax felt the culmination of his journey settle within him, a deep, steady sense of peace and understanding. And so, at last, Snorlax rested fully. The journey that had begun as a simple desire to move, to explore, to discover, had led him through countless landscapes and experiences, each teaching him the quiet power of presence, patience, and careful observation. The grove embraced him, cradling him in its gentle rhythm, while the river, the plants, and the Pokémon offered a final lullaby, perfect in its simplicity and depth. The journey's rest was not the end, but a continuation of the rhythm he had discovered. Slow, deliberate, and fully aware, Snorlax lay there, fully present, breathing in harmony with the grove, part of a world that moved gracefully, patiently, and beautifully around him. And as sleep finally overtook him, soft and aware, he knew he had arrived, not at a destination measured by distance, but at a place of understanding, of harmony, and of profound, enduring peace.